Welcome, everyone, to the wonderful event we have today, in particular, Rethinking Women's Leadership in Business. Welcome and thank you all for joining. This is hosted by the Women Business Collaborative with Edie and with Andy Simon, as well as Catalyzing the Future. My name is Sai, and I'm an executive coach and consultant, and likewise a transformation individual. In particular, deep gratitude goes to all the contributors that have gotten us here today, all the panelists, all the chairs, all the participants, all the guests, and everyone that has really contributed so much to get us here. Ever so quickly, we're at a nexus now and always between the past and the future. And that nexus is extremely key. And we need to really begin to understand and recognize the past, appreciate the present, and most definitely catalyze the future. We need to advance a sustainable movement that truly can have an impact. And at the same time, we need to embrace a collective narrative, as you'll learn a lot more as we go throughout the day, and truly a narrative that we can share and live. The rest of the day is going to be an ecosystem of inquiry around society, around business, around leadership, and around women and men across all industries. The guests are absolutely brilliant, and we thank them all. With very little left to say, this event is organized, again, across 3 streams. All the links are available on the Catalyzing the Future website, and we welcome everyone. With that, I welcome Edie and Andy. Would love to hear your voices and move forward. So thank you.
So I'm Andy Simon, and I will take the first step here and welcome you all to our marvelous event today. Thank you for Sai for catalyzing the future, Edie Frazier, our inspirational leader at Women Business Collaborative, and I'm a corporate anthropologist. I specialize in helping organizations and the people inside change. I'm also the author of this new book, Rethink, Smashing the Myths of Women in Business, which became the catalyst for catalyzing the future today. What we were really concerned about as we were writing this book was how to help other women see what's possible so they could become the best that they could be. Today came together because we want to share our vision, how to create a better world with businesses leading the way. We say at Women's Business Collaborative, further, faster, together for a reason. Because as you listen to these 9 amazing panels and the panelists in them, you're going to hear their stories, a great deal about how we have to see, feel, and think differently about what's possible for women today and into the future. You're going to hear what women have been through, the hurdles, the glass ceilings, how we're shattering brick walls, but we're doing it, and they keep coming back again. I heard recently a wonderful quote that Maya Angelou had to walk so Amanda Gorman could run. In some ways, you're going to feel the same way. And Edie's smiling, because that's exactly what we're doing. We've all walked, and now by collaborating, we can run faster. You're going to feel the power of the moment, and there's really a movement going on. One that we want to have you embrace and find all kinds of ways to have actionable information and innovation. I know, and we know, that you're going to be inspired by the dream and imagine the future. The way we work is that if we imagine the future, we can make it happen now. The future is actually here now. You just don't know it yet. So today, as you're listening, remember that Marian Wright Edelman said, you can't be it if you can't see it. My hope is that you see it today. And then I'll leave you with Margaret Mead's favorite quote from myself. We should never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And with that, enjoy the day, and let me turn it over to Edie to tell us what's coming and what comes next. Edie, thank you.
Thank you, Sai, and thank you, Andy. And what a precious partnership. We are so thrilled with Women Business Collaborative to push our mission together of equal position pay and power. And we're full of gratitude because we are elevating one another and we are doing it faster together. As we think about today and we think about what we're committing to, I think of the quote from Mary Barra, the CEO of General Motors. Whatever you decide to do do it with passion and all the energy that you have. And of course, Helen Keller said, alone we do so little, together we do so much. So think through several of these key pronouns and what you think about you are doing in the area of transformation and change, of purpose, of your passion and your vision, building relationships and building those for others, the partnerships, collaboration, acceleration, technology embrace, the grit and the grace, diversity, as we are so committed to our sisters of color, as we walk this journey or run faster with those elevating our sisters of color to reflect this nation. And with that innovation, our concern for the future of being healthy, of learning and sharing, of our mentorships and sponsorships. And with that, this day of all the 9 panels, as we think through the exquisite learnings and actions, as Andy said, let us all think through the young people coming up the system. And with that, it is Amanda Gorman saying, hear me as a woman, have me as your sister, see me as change, say I am movement, that I am the year, that we are in this era of the women. Won't you be my sister? Faster together. Thank you. And what a treat now that we will turn to 2 major keynotes.
Thank you so much, Edie.
We will turn to 2 keynotes now. And the first is such a pleasure. It's Lisa Stone. Lisa Stone has been elevating women, contributing to women, and raising hundreds of millions of dollars for women capital to support women entrepreneurs and women-led firms, so that she is now managing director of West River Group, leading capital firm and pushing hard to be the first to support women and women of color. And alongside her investment and her C-level entrepreneurship experience, she is pushing forward with new thinking, elevation, and how proud we are to have Lisa Stone as an advisory champion of WBC and a thought leader. Lisa Stone.
Thank you so much, Edie, or should I say big sister. I am really excited to talk to you all today. Of the 9 initiatives that motivated me to join WSC's Advisory Council, the one that I want to talk about is our power to catalyze the future, specifically capital. Women as controllers of capital, as allocators, as investors, and also women as owners of capital, both as business leaders, as entrepreneurs, but also as consumers. Now, I have some data. Welcome from Silicon Valley this morning, where I'm headquartered. I have some data I want to share with you. But first, I want to also share the secret that I feel like I learned developing as a serial entrepreneur, 5 different communities that reached between 25 million and 127 million uniques every month. And that is, our biggest agendas will only succeed to the degree to which we commit to each other as a community. The quality of our alliance and our execution is everything. And to that end, I want to share a quick side story. And I'm warning Cy that I'm about to share my screen, if I may. Is that working? Can everyone see it, Cy?
Looks like we can't see it Lisa.
Okay. Well, I am going to tell, share screen. That might help.
There you go.
One moment, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. Now, can everybody see this screen?
We're not seeing it.
Okay. Well, I will press forward at any rate. All right. So here is a little story I want to share. Once upon a time, when I was CEO and co-founder of a company called BlogHer, I was on a dance floor in 2010 next to a woman who would become a 2-time New York Times bestselling author named Luvvie Ajayi. We did not know each other at the time, but we did know the woman who immediately took over the dance floor when Beyonce's All the Single Ladies hit came on. Now, we knew this woman was a mommy blogger from Provo, Utah. What we did not know was that before she had her 5 children, she was BYU's possibly best dance major ever. And y'all, she tore it up. I mean, she had every move, the finger wave, she had the locks, she had everything except for the legless onesie. And Luvvie and I looked at each other and we're like, she's got to teach us. So we ran over, stopped the DJ, made him replay the song, and did our level best to imitate her incredible moves. Why do I tell you that story? Because for the next 6 years, Luvvie Ajayi Jones and I, and you can find her at awesomelyluvvie.com, worked collaboratively to help develop BlogHer as the single most inclusive, diverse global stage for women blogging that we could think of. She donated countless hours as a speaker and as a teacher. So when she wrote her first bestseller in 2016, I said, please come to Silicon Valley. I want to take you on a tour. And amongst all the different congregations and press that we did, I took her to 3 big tech companies. Now, mind you, this was pre-Me Too, pre-Time's Up. Things were a little fraught out here. And I said, I don't know what's going to happen, but we're going to go to Google, we're going to go to Logitech, and we're going to go to Twitter. And I have to tell y'all that this trip was one of the most embarrassing moments of my life as a leader, but also one of the most validating. And I'll tell you why after I share with you some of the data. Now, quickly, I mentioned that we have some real performance data emerging about women in venture and women in venture investing. I'm sure all of y'all have read the incredible reports from McKinsey since 2014 validating that the more diverse and inclusive a leadership team with regard to gender and race, the better its profitability and performance. The same is true of venture. It turns out a virtuous cycle has emerged. Where investing teams are diverse, they are much more likely to invest in diverse entrepreneurs. And those diverse entrepreneur leadership teams are highly correlated with extremely better business returns. I'll be specific. From 2009 to 2018, PitchBook reports that of the top quartile VCs, 69+% had a woman on the team. And that's incredible, since only about 8 to 12% of women VCs were at the table at the time. What's more, when there's a woman at the table, those firms were more than 3 times more likely to invest in women CEOs and 2 times more likely to invest in women entrepreneurs. Why does that matter? That matters because those teams are correlated with multiples on invested capital that are 30% higher. That means, very specifically, according to another study, that when there was at least 1 woman on the founding team, the businesses were valued 63% higher. When there was at least 1 person of color on the founding team, the businesses were valued at least 65% higher. That's fantastic news, right? Material value. It was so good, in fact, that Dr. Jennifer Eberhard at Stanford correlated those outstanding results with the fiduciary standard. Now, as I'm sure many of you are aware, the fiduciary standard is a firm like mine's legal obligation to pursue the best possible returns on behalf of the investors. She wrote, diversity, in fact, is not only a moral obligation, aka the right thing to do, it is a fiduciary one, the smart thing to do, perhaps not the legal obligation to do, to lead to fewer losses and a better performance. There's only one challenge, Houston. We have a problem. 98.7% of institutional capital is managed by men, and yes, the grand majority of those men are white. 1.3% is managed by women and or people of color. And that matters because the correlation between diverse investing teams investing in diverse entrepreneurs, the inverse is also true. It turns out that when you remove diversity from the virtuous circle, the investing teams, which are overwhelmingly white and overwhelmingly male, invest primarily in other white men. The problem is that that is damaging returns in two ways. Number one, it means that all those benefits on multiples of invested capital, the correlation I mentioned, and business value do not happen. The performance is not as strong. But the other thing it's so important for us to remember is that every dollar, and we know this especially post-pandemic, that goes into technology and that goes into healthcare and life sciences has a material effect on our lives. What happens if the lens through which those dollars are invested are only 1%ers who happen to be white men? Well, we get things like AI-driven water fountains that don't recognize Black hands and ATMs that don't recognize people who are shorter or browner than the people who made the investment. There's a really interesting study that Sylvia Ann Hewlett did with the Center for Talent Innovation. She says there are two kinds of diversity and inclusivity. There's the classic demographic, your race, your gender, your socioeconomic background, your education. And then there is an acquired inclusivity. How much are you celebrating that difference? How much are you actually leveraging the different thinking in the brains around the table in order to create some alchemy? In her experience and in her findings, she reports that it turns out studies strongly suggest that homogeneity stifles innovation. And innovation is what I think we can agree we need more than ever. So the good news is we do have power, and I'll be quick. It turns out that 88% of millennial investors want to see their dollars do good in the world, and they believe that it is possible to invest both for returns and to make the world a better place. The other good news is that women are much more likely to want to invest that way than men. 90% of us say we want to, and we're looking for options. There's more good news, which is that of the trillions of dollars that are going to be acquired by women over the next 25 years through inheritance, 70% of those will be inherited by women. And I think we all know that women control and or influence 80% of the consumer spending, including automotive and electronics. So as the wonderful Eileen H. Harper and Reggie Van Lee published in Harvard Business Review last August in the midst of the pandemic, hey, foundations, family offices, college endowments, corporations, hey, investors in institutional capital, it's up to you. And guess what, y'all? They're the ones managing our money, because we know when we look at the beautiful advisory board and community that Edie and Gwen and team have pulled together, that we are the fortunate, we are the haves. Let me get back to that crazy story and then I'll wrap up. Turns out that Luvvie Ajayi Jones, again, awesomelyluvvie.com, she's written 2 New York Times bestsellers. When we came to Silicon Valley, here's what happened. We went to Twitter, and I was one of 2 white people in the room. There was a strong showing, standing room only, from Black Twitter. We gave great talk. Luvvie's a genius. We also went to Google, where the incredible VP of Product, Bradley Horowitz, a white man who has been an incredible leader at Google for years, interviewed Levy on the same stage that President Obama had when he was there. And there were even more people. And I was one of 4 white people in the room who took time out of her day to listen to this talk. And I was depressed and a little embarrassed. I had warned her that things were a little fraught in Silicon Valley, but I expected more. And then we went to Logitech. And at Logitech, we had a standing room only crowd where there were just as many, I'd say 300 plus people in the East Bay. There were just as many men as women in the room. I'd say 50-50, which in itself is unusual at a technology company typically. And there were almost as many people of color as there were white people, most of whom were men, in the room, applauding, asking questions, and really welcoming this author. Why? The answer is CEO Bracken Darrell. He is someone who has embraced inclusivity on behalf of innovation and technology and winning for his entire career, and in particular here at Logitech. I've since had the opportunity to get to know him a little bit through some of the angel investing I've done. And I have to tell you, he is proof positive that we can apply our performance and our own power base as consumers and business leaders to work with allies in order to achieve. So I think our next step is exactly as Edie said. It's time for us to create an inclusive culture as we hire diverse teams, as we measure how we perform, and as we track our investments, calling up the people we pay those fees to ask them where that money is going, and could they please make sure that you are supporting the kind of business leaders you want to see in the world. We have accountability to each other. And I'm making a personal commitment. I'm happy to help anyone start. And I really want to thank Edie for this opportunity to share this with you.
Thank you so much, Lisa Stone, for bringing Lovely in and the story and the board valuations and the importance of diversity. Gwen Young and I are very excited. We have been tracking with Equilar, as you know, for 7 months. Women joining public boards. And we hit a record in April of 44% women. So as everything else we're doing, we are driving a 23% women of color. Last month, 25% women of color. We're driving that change. And as you said, diversity is both moral and fiduciary. And when you talk about capital and the power of that capital, tying to the women of we thank you, Lisa, for setting this, for being a catalyst of change. Now we'd like to introduce Joey Ryman. Joey Ryman is an icon of companies of purpose. He's creator and founder of Bright House, a visionary creator of companies of purpose, and now a co-head of Brand New World Studios. They are producing Why is Mona Lisa Smiling? And they've got a YouTube channel. His book, Story of Purpose, was the one that has elevated so many companies to drive change. And with it, we see that those like Indra Nooyi founded their companies of purpose, why she is a WBC trailblazer for our summit, and why Joey Ryman is a WBC trailblazer, and why we have such an important partnership as our lives of purpose and our companies of purpose and our accountability expert, Joey Ryman. Joey?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Edie. And it's such an honor to be here. Lisa, thank you for that fabulous talk. You delivered it with both, you delivered the data with a high degree of soulfulness, which I love, that combination. You know, this is my 21st year as a professor at Emory University's business school. And on the first day, first class, I start with a quote from Mark Twain. So I'd like to do that again. The quote is, "The 2 best days of your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why. And that is so true. It's true personally, it's true professionally. Companies who find their why can deal with any what and any who. They're buffeted during adversity, and they're bolstered during good times. And with this sea change, and it truly is a sea change, we see a tremendous transformation in business. And the nomenclature actually changes. We no longer really focus on the goal of the company as much as our role in society. I mean, that's a pretty big leap. We're focused not just on our income, but on our outcome. And outcome is a generative concept. It's forever. It changes lives. It changes generations. We no longer really talk about philanthropy or even corporate social responsibility, because companies who get to help other companies and people and better society, that's not corporate social responsibility, which almost sounds punitive. It's corporate social opportunity to not just be part of the Fortune 500, but the Fortunate 500, the companies that help others. And that together has, well, the best way to put it is we are no longer just focused on the life of business, but the business of life. And that market sizing is enormous. I mean, just think about it, all of you in business. If your customers are part of the arena of possibility, of the business of life, that's a lot more people than just the life of business. And associates love it, and partners love it, and suppliers love it. We are moving from that shareholder, very focused shareholder concept, and expanding our orbit of caring to stakeholders, everyone, and being genuine in a moral and ethical sense. What Lisa talked about, that fiduciary responsibility. You know, friendship, not leadership, is fiduciary responsibility. And also this notion of collaboration. You know, everyone falls in love with Edie, but I love the fact that it's a collaborative and not a cooperative. And there's a very big difference. It sounds like a nuance, cooperation versus collaboration, but that's not true. Cooperation is a division of labor. If we're making a puzzle, everyone's got a piece that they've got to work on. But collaboration is not a division, it's a multiplication. And it suggests that we all are on the same page, participating in service of the whole puzzle. To put in band terms, collaborators are the band members. The roadies are the cooperatives. They cooperate in order to make the band better, sound better. So this notion of moving from cooperation to collaboration and it's built into our name, is just remarkable. And I encourage everyone to think about collaborating with each other in service of one shared purpose, which is the business of life, not just the life of business, versus just cooperating. Other nomenclature that's changed is this notion of the chief marketing officer. Marketing has been around about 200 years. The notion of branding came from searing cattle, so people next door to me would know they were my cattle. Well, branding really hasn't changed a whole lot until now, until this notion that, you know, it's much more, a business is much more than just a mission, which is what I do. It's much more than a vision, which is where I'm going, but it's actually a why, not a what, not a where, but why I am here. And if we understand why, we can do anything that we want to do. Why is the most powerful word not used in business. And today, as business moves towards purpose and moves towards all participating, again, Edie, love you, collaborative. You know, I think participation is the new purpose, because if you don't participate, then the purpose means nothing. I often have said that purpose without participation is just parchment. That's all it is. It's just paper. But when we participate, we multiply our forces. Our energy evolves. Our energy becomes much more powerful, and our passion becomes really the fuel for our purpose. You know, I have to tell you a story that I was reminded by when Lisa Stone was talking about the dancer being on the dance floor. It made me think of an amazing story about purpose, which I want to share with you. Many years ago, there was an amazing dancer. She was 8, 9 years old. Her parents realized how great she was, so they got extra jobs to put her through dance school. And she became better and better and better. And all the critics and dance professionals said, this woman will change the world of dance. And her parents were so proud of her because her parents, well, they wanted her to live her dream of being a dancer. So she's now 19 years old, and she's invited to the Apollo Theater in Harlem to dance in front of the great masters of dance. And her parents are there, her uncles, aunts, her family, all the dance teachers throughout her career, and the press is there, New York Times, everyone. It was just amazing. And the announcer comes out, the Psy, and says, you are about to witness one of the greatest dance performances, if not the best we've ever seen in the Apollo Theater. And he introduces this woman, and a 19-year-old African-American woman comes out, taps on the microphone and says, Mom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I can't, I don't want to dance. And the place is shattered with silence. And she says, but I do want to sing a song. And Ella Fitzgerald belts out a song that changes jazz, changes the world forever. What happened? What happened was beautiful. What happened was purpose. Behind that curtain, when it was the most important moment of her life, she decided that dance was not her dream. It may have been her parents' dream, but it wasn't her dream. Her dream was to sing. And she brought to that stage an enormous amount of courage. I mean, imagine how much courage you need to do what she did. So my question to all of you is, what's your Ella? What is your Ella? Think about it tonight, tomorrow. What is your Ella, and what is your company's Ella? Because if you find that, well, you'll have a world full of a lot more harmony. A lot more harmony. Yeah. Well, with that said, I encourage all of you to move away from competition and focus on distinctiveness. As Edie referred to it earlier, it's really about collaboration, not cooperation or not competition. It's not about a leg up, it's about your legacy. Go make one. Thank you.
Thank you, Joey. We are so thoughtful now of just quickly thinking the why. Where's your Ella? Why have you and Lisa talked about two dancers, but they both found their whys? And your passion is your fuel, and your terminology of changing from corporate social responsibility to corporate social opportunity. And instead of the Fortune 500, the Fortunate 500, and the business of life and collaboration, and the participation is that of purpose, and the passion is our fuel. With that, Joey, thank you so much.
Thank you, Edie.
There's Jamie, I think. Jamie?
We are live.
Okay, you're good, Kate. Thank you. Okay. Bye. Excellent. Made it.
Hello, hello. We are live, everybody. So we'll just give our guests here a chance to jump in. And we will get started.
Wonderful. Welcome to the Creating Women Leaders Today for the Business of Tomorrow. And with that, we welcome Jamie to introduce and moderate the conversation.
That sounds great. And I think we're just looking for Esther here. I see the fabulous Becky Shambaugh and Mia Menz, and I think we're just looking for Esther. So while we wait for Esther to jump in with us, we're all dealing with this new technology, which is fun, but also very scary at the same time. We love it. But let's get started. I'll go ahead and I'll do the introductions for both myself and then Becky and Mia, and then hopefully Esther will be on and we will jump in. We've got an amazing panel today. So I'm Jamie Candy. I am the CEO of an education technology company called Edmentum. We serve roughly 10 million students in the United States, and I'm very honored to do this work. I've been running education companies for the last 10 plus years, and prior to that, I had a career started in financial services. And so I'm honored to be here and to be your host and facilitator for today's panel. And I'd love to do some introductions. So I'm going to start with Mia Menz. Mia is the Global Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer and CEO of Impact Ventures for Sodexo. She's responsible for leveraging diversity and inclusion as a key business differentiator worldwide for Sodexo. She also oversees corporate social responsibility and Stop Hunger for Sodexo North America and leads Sodexo Magic, a joint venture between Sodexo and Magic Johnson. So Mia, you are not busy at all. Prior to your current position, Mia held the role of Chief Administration Officer at Sodexo North America. In this position, she was accountable for driving critical strategic initiatives in support of NORAM business transformation. And prior to that position, she was CEO of Benefits and Reward Services, an employee engagement software company. Mia mentors passionately, and we're going to hear her talk about this today. I was really inspired when we did our prep call, both formally and informally. She's founded her own nonprofit, Seven Sisters to Sisters, and serves on the boards of Girls Inc., the Emerge Fellows program, Catalyst, and the Greater Houston Partnership. She's also a corporate director. We just heard Edie talking about that for H&R Block and Limeade. Ms. Menz has been recognized by Black Enterprise as one of the most powerful women in corporate America. She holds a BA in economics at Wellesley College and an MBA from Harvard. Welcome, Mia. And Rebecca, we'll call her Becky Shambaugh, if that's okay, Becky. So leadership expert, author, speaker, founder, and CEO of Women in Leadership and Learning, one of the first coaching and leadership development programs for women in the country. Becky's consulting firm, Shambaugh Leadership, is known for creating inclusive and equitable work cultures that incorporate end-to-end pipeline strategy for women early on in their career through the executive ranks. Becky's also an author of a best-selling book. Everybody's got to go get this after this panel. It's Not a Glass Ceiling, it is a Sticky Floor, which is known for helping women to really lean into their leadership and reach fullest potential. Becky's a thought leader in gender balance and speaks on many conferences and her company's research and best practices. She's been featured in such publications as Harvard Business Review, Leader to Leader, Huffington Post, as well as showcased on CNBC, TED Talks, and ABC. So we are very, very excited, and it looks like we may have been a little bit delayed on the addition to Esther. So when we get Esther in, I'm going to break and do a quick intro, but we're going to get started. And I just wanted to share the goal for today is we're really talking about, okay, we have this big challenge, and we'll talk about some statistics and look at some data points here. But women make up roughly half of the corporate workforce in the United States. And by the time you get to C-suite and executive ranks, it falls dramatically down to 20%. And for women of color, it is much, much lower than that, a small fraction of the 20%. And so we want to kind of ground today's discussion in why is that happening? What is going on? And then walk away from today's panel discussion with some really specific actions and what do we do about it? How do we build the pipeline of women leaders that will take us into the business of tomorrow? So it's very much about what has this great group of panelists done in their career to really push through to get to the top ranks? And then in addition to that, what can they share with you all as you leave and you go back to your companies to say, you know what, we're going to start doing these things differently. And so we'll talk a bit about that. So I'm going to attempt here very quickly to show a very quick slide. And in an effort to provide you just quick, see if you can see that here. It may not be working. Okay, I'm going to take you through some statistics. So every year, oh, there we go. I think you may be able to see that. Every year, McKinsey and Lean In actually publish a really fabulous research, and this is the 5th year that they've been publishing. And basically, it looks at women in corporate America and how are we progressing through the ranks. And so, and Becky, you've done a ton of research on this as well, so we're going to talk about that. But like I said, as you get into the entry-level positions in corporate America, women make up roughly 50%. And then as you work your way through from manager to senior manager, VP to C-suite, it falls to 20%. So that's a pretty big drop-off from going into corporate America to getting to the top spots. We're going to talk about why that is. Further, when you look at the actual wage gap that occurs, and we know that women on average make much less than men. Research comes out on this every single year. I think what I saw during the pandemic is that it improved by 1 penny for women versus men, a dollar, penny better in terms of for every dollar that men make. But what's really interesting is when you look at women who on average make about 80 cents on the dollar, and then it falls all the way down to Latina women making about 50 cents on the dollar to men. What's stark and what's really troublesome about that statistic is when you actually take that hourly rate and you extend that over the lifetime of a 40-year career. White women on average will make about $400,000 less than white men. Black women will make roughly $1 million less over their 40-year career than white men, and Latinas 1.1 million. So that's a big amount of money. So let's start with, it's an issue. We know that we're making tons of strides. We've got a really good discussion that we're going to have today. And so Becky, I want to start with you. I just talked about the pipeline and how it drops from 50% down to much lower as we get into the C-suite. Can you tell us 1 to 2 reasons why this is happening? So from all the research and experience that you've done, why is there such a drop-off? What's specifically happening as we go from entry level to a much lower percentage in the C-suite?
Well, thank you, Jamie. And by the way, thank you for pulling this together. And Mia, just proud to collaborate with you. And we'll look forward to having Esther on here. And I might say that while I'm on a number of boards, I'm also on the board of directors of Women Business Collaborative. And if you're not involved, get involved, because that also is really helping with some of the efforts that we're doing to create that collective voice. But listen, if we had the answers, we'd probably be a lot further ahead than we are. But I think given the last year and the pandemic, I think it has heightened the awareness and kind of taken the Band-Aid off of where we need to go. We can't wait 100 years. We can't wait 20 years, 70 years to make this happen. We can at the 21st century. So I think Shambo works a lot inside the ecosystem of an organization and really digging deep to look at not just the women in the pipeline and some of their development areas and opportunities in creating those programs, but we also look at the systems and the subtleties that are going on in the practices. And you get to these different phases of a career. They're dynamic. So for the first 5 years for a woman early on in her career, the prescriptive sort of training, development, mentoring is different than somebody in their mid-year career. And then when you reach that high potential and that marzipan layer just below the C-suite, that's a different prescriptive sort of approach as well. So I think the biggest mistake organizations make across the board is they think it's going to happen naturally. And you know what? Everybody knows it just doesn't. And so if I look in the time that we have, some key things for all of our listeners. First off, important to know that 77% of women, this is part of our studies and other indexes out there, don't have or feel like they have a clear career path. And so right at that manager, supervisor level is really having that mentoring, that sitting down, looking at their aspirations, really putting them through training to help define what their strengths are, really creating that ongoing path to really support them, reinforce new assignments for them, and really help them to aspire to, but really take action on those goals. So 77% of women versus men, almost 80% of men feel like they have a clear path. And so there's something that needs to happen early on in a woman's career to help her to know it's possible and to really give her those tools. And we find that a lot of it is the management responsibility, the lack of constructive feedback, the lack of taking time to understand what their goals are and to create that plan and let them know they have their shoulder to support them. But if you look where that number drops off, Jamie, right, what's happening here? We have found that close to 78% of women who aspire to be in that executive suite or that hypo or that actually higher than that really don't have a clear path or understanding how to get the P&L responsibilities. And that is really key. That's not the only silver bullet, but where a majority of men have a clear understanding of how to get the P&L responsibilities, perhaps they are a little bit more boastful about finding that out and having their male colleagues support them in that, which is another issue. But we need to, as organizations, to clearly examine at that juncture when we're considering P&L responsibilities for our leadership, what happens to women? Why are they opting out? Why are they not selected? And find out what those gaps are, and then really create the right coaching and training and development. Some of those is strategic orientation, executive presence. Some of this is just not having enough sponsors, right, and allies. And a lot of it is also riddled with deep-rooted bias. So I think one of the most important things is to really get clear on what's happening and why we're turning down women at the P&L responsibility, and really put some strength around that gap to really close that. And then you will hopefully see a greater number of women coming through and getting those P&L responsibilities, which is mostly a criteria to move into the, if you will, the executive C-suite and beyond, to have that financial business acumen. We all know this. We've heard it over and over again. Sponsorship is key. In every executive I've spoken to, every board leader, they've always had a sponsor. And the studies will tell you, Sylvia Hewitt's great work several years ago in The Sponsor Effect said that women are over-mentored and under-sponsored. Close to 78% believe that the social capital gets them to where they want to go. And of course, they are going out there and developing those mentors early on and those sponsors. Where women, and sometimes we call this a sticky floor, are doing the work. They're trying to get the A+. But when you rise and ascend to these different levels, it is the relational capital. And so I think organizations need to really think about whether it's informal sponsorship or formal sponsorship. It's making sure that there's an equal playing field for women and women of color, particularly, to have those sponsors. And if they don't, just to really create those programs where they have that, because that will give them the lift. That will give them the accessibility which they don't have. That will create a path for them to connect with those influential relationships. And that will create the conversation that's not happening now in the boardroom, in talent review and succession plans. Who's Susie? Who's Cheryl? I don't know them. Well, that sponsor will advocate for them. So that is highly critical. But when you have sponsorship programs, you need to be accountable. Some sponsors are 50% there, 50% not there. Don't start a sponsorship program unless you have key metrics and measures for success and accountability. And then lastly, I will talk about succession. Succession has always been a really great opportunity to identify those high potentials, give those folks an opportunity to really take on new assignments and roles and responsibilities, to be prepared and to be ready now for those next positions. So we have found in succession, after we do some of the examination, that it's the same people. And it's the same demographic of people, not to disparage white men, but we're not diversifying the slate of candidates. And part of that is because of the criteria that we're using, which needs to be neutralized and invisible. We need to have specific objective criterion for everyone. And I think there is this comfort zone. To be honest with you, we like to pick people like us. And so from the CEO down, we need to create clear metrics around diverse slates for succession. If I was in HR, diversity, inclusion, or if I was on a board, I would make sure that would be one of the first things that I look at, to take responsibility, to making sure that we have equitable opportunities for the diverse candidates and women to be a part of that succession planning. The other part about succession planning, we really focus on the ready now. And we're encouraging clients to go deeper down into the pipeline and start building that succession pipeline earlier on, so you can develop and foster those folks that we really want to take and groom, which could be 3 to 4 or 5 years before they're really ready to move into those executive leadership positions. So
right.
Again, holding people accountable for that. And I will just say one more thing is that I think women need to be a voice for other women. It's lonely up there, I know, but we need our role is having that voice. And the more women that have a voice for other women, then we have the more power and influence. And just as we're asking for sponsorship, we're asking for women to sponsor other women too. That's the power I don't think sometimes we have. So those are just a few suggestions, Jamie.
That's great. Thank you, Becky. So we have Esther on, and Esther, I'll do your bio in just a minute when I move over to ask you the first question, but I want to touch base with Mia first. So Mia, your life story is pretty incredible. You shared it with me when we did our prep call. And you know, you're a real personal example of somebody who has pushed through to the top of the top. I mean, when you look at the number, when you talk about P&L responsibility, yours is massive. And you've built this incredible career at Sodexo. And I wonder if you just take 2 minutes to walk our audience through, like, just very personally, like, how did you do this? We're going to talk later in a few minutes about mentoring, which I know is a big mentoring sponsoring. We also say allyship here at Edmentum. But in terms of your life story and really, you know, how you've gotten into these top positions, what can you tell our audience around what you did, how you persevered through the chances that you took?
Thank you, Jamie. It's so nice to be with you, Becky and Esther as well. Really great to share the stage. I know we're all very passionate about this topic. And I have really committed my life's work to also helping women advance because, Jamie, what you describe is my own life story and all that I've had to overcome, but also all the tremendous opportunities that I've been presented with. I'm an immigrant. I know we talked about that journey coming to this country as a young girl, and all that conveyed and all the ways that shaped my life and my life experiences, particularly just seeing the ways in which my parents really struggled to reestablish themselves and the lessons they taught us about grit and perseverance and work integrity. Those things were really important, but I don't think they were enough. I will say that my parents really focused on education. I went to Wellesley College and Harvard Business School, and there are moments that I wonder if I didn't have those credentials, if people would have taken a chance on me. As I even think about the makeup of our C-suite and the African-American leaders that are represented on the C-suite, most of them have Ivy League degrees. And so I think there is something there we need to evaluate. I don't know how easily it is for women to make their way from the bottom to the top. You hear all these great stories in my company of people that started from dishwasher all the way to executive. I don't see a lot of those stories for people of color. So that's a watch out. But I have benefited tremendously from mentoring. People that just showed up for me at those right moments in my life to say, you can do it, you have what it takes. They helped me embrace the notion of risk. And so I would say that at each juncture, I took jobs before I thought I was ready, before I thought I was capable. Every assignment I've had, including my current one, feels like a stretch assignment, but that has made for the most rich career. That would not have happened if people were not there at those transformative moments to say, one, we're going to create the opportunity for you, but we're going to hold your hand as you go through it. That has been an enormous gift. I'm not sure if this is the right moment to touch a little bit on what Becky said. If not, I'll come back because I really do want to add a couple of points to how she analyzed the gaps that we're seeing.
Sure. Why don't we, do you want to take one of those now and then we'll jump over to Esther?
I would love that because as I hear Becky talk about, you and Becky actually introduced the topic with all these sobering statistics. I think maybe the most disappointing thing about my career is that I'm an outlier. And while I believe that I've earned my place, I also know that, you know, every opportunity has been enabled by a white male leader. And so I'm overwhelmed by all the filtering mechanisms that curtail opportunities for women. And I think we just have to be really thoughtful. You know, when you talk about that gap, and those statistics I did not know over the lifetime, the gap in earning, you have to consider that companies are also losing because the fact that women are not full participants in society has tremendous economic impact. And I will be more pessimistic than Becky in saying, because I've also seen all the studies, that I really think that what we're seeing is that it doesn't matter how good women are, how talented, educated, ambitious, maybe even lucky, how educated. I think it just comes down to the fact that we are impacted by discrimination. I think that's it. That the only way we overcome this is when those in positions of power decide that they want to think differently about what women can do. It's an uncomfortable fact and it's hard to prove, but I just don't think we can get away from the fact that this is at the heart of this. This is about discrimination. And so it is about all the things Becky said, but we have got to work really hard to change the perception of what women can do.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. And we're in this moment right now, and we got to keep pushing through it, because we're at this inflection point, and real change can happen. You and I talked about in the prep call, and I'll move over to Esther here, but, women are, we tend to look at a job description or a job, early on in our careers, and we feel like we have to check all the boxes before we can go for it. And men oftentimes will have one or two things that they've done in their career and they go for it. And so it's really putting ourselves out there, pushing for it, stretching for it, taking those chances. Esther, I'm going to do a quick bio of you because you have an amazing, amazing career, and everybody can see that if you go to Catalyzing Future, the agenda. But just very quickly to give everybody an introduction on Esther, and then I'll turn to my question to you. Esther is the president and CEO of the Latino Corporate Directors Association, which convenes Latino directors and executives at the highest levels of corporate leadership who share the mission to increase the number of U.S. Latinos on corporate boards. She is a proven leader and executive who brings a 30-year record of successfully executing strategic business plans to drive organizational effectiveness, growth, impact, and in her current role influences some of the most powerful companies by bringing together accomplished executives at the pinnacle of corporate governance to advance diversity in the boardroom. You have worked at all levels: Congress, the executive branch, the nonprofit, for-profit, just an incredible background and history. You're up to speed on the conversation we're having here, and I had shared the slide that you had actually provided to us prior. I walked the audience through the slide around the pay gap, which is very real and very significant, and for Latina women is like 1.1 million over a 40-year career in reference to what men make. And so as you look at women of color making up 3% of C-suite and Latina women a percentage of that, it's a very small percentage. We're not closing gaps in wages for women of color versus men and women in general. Share with us, you've had this career where you've been deeply focused on advancing women and Latinas. And share with us, what have you done in your career to push through this funnel to get to the place where you're at today? What is it that you've done? What can you share with our audience that will help them as they think about how they can pursue their interests?
Thank you, Jamie. It's a great pleasure to be here with our distinguished panel. My personal and professional pursuit has been focused on elevating Latinas to positions of power and helping them claim their seat at the table. But my trajectory there was not a straight line. I identify with Mia's remarks. I too am an immigrant. I was born in Mexico. I'm a daughter of a landscape laborer and a garment worker. But somewhere along the line, certainly education was a key factor. And having, my older siblings, especially because my parents didn't have much education, my siblings really were also role models and helped showcase. We saw that going to school and, of course, a hard work ethic that we saw with our parents really could take you to another level. And as I went to a private college and found, that the profiles of our leaders in the country did not reflect my experience or who I was really motivated to move to Washington, D.C. I grew up in California, and after college in 1990, I moved to D.C. and had an opportunity to work on Capitol Hill, and as you mentioned, with some of our top leaders in the country. And there was a chance taken on me. I was tapped for roles very young in my career. I was working for the Congressional Hispanic Caucus on all of the important issues of the nation and how this community is a big part of it. And the position for executive director opened up after I had been there about a year. I was in my mid to late 20s. And when there was a transition, they looked over, and it was a lot of our male leaders looked over to me and said, "Are you interested in the executive director role?" And I looked at myself and I thought, oh my God, it's going to be so much work. There's already so much on the plate. This was going through my mind. And I decided, I'm going to go for it. I've shown that, one, I can do the job, and I'm going to have people around me that are going to support me. So that was a really big move. And every step after that, I have found that we're kind of a sponge. We're adaptable, we're resilient, we're resourceful. And all of those traits really are what distinguish, especially if you come from such humble roots. We sometimes do have the sense that we have to, overperform. And I think as you mature in the profession, your professional career, you find, what, I am as qualified as anyone else. And that's one of the things in my different roles with young people and professionals. Before my current job at the Latino Corporate Directors Association, I was CEO of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, which was a phenomenal organization. We raised monies for internships and fellowships, having these young people, many who never left their communities, to come to Washington, D.C. and work in the halls of power, these marbled halls. And I would tell them, this capital and this country is as much yours as anybody else's, because, in their experience, they always were put down or felt like they were others. And it's sometimes that embracing, and we gave them that 360-degree sort of platform and mentors and a community, so that we knew when they got in that door and they had that type of support, they were not only going to exceed, they were going to really shine. And so that was that really, along the way into my role today, clearly I work with some of the most accomplished and respected leaders in business who are Latinos and Latinas, and making a difference in the corporate boardrooms. But I also think, the charts, which I had in advance and we put together as a group, are very alarming. I would echo Mia's point that there are big differences in how we try and advance women, all of us together. Jamie, in some of our planning calls, you were talking about how do we create a sisterhood of empowerment, of supporting one another, and one of those things has to do with the fact that supporting Latinas and women of color has different nuances. We have different experiences, and for Latinas, we are invisible in the boardroom and the C-suite. And I'll just share with you a little bit of background. I think, in addition to Mia's point, it's about discrimination, but there are some very deep-seated misperceptions and misinformation about the Latino community. For example, there's polling data that shows that white Americans believe that the majority of Latinos are undocumented. And that could not be furthest from the truth. 80% of Latinos are US citizens, and most are here legally. But that kind of polling and perception kind of really reinforces this invisibility, and somehow people feel they're justified in how they are perceiving a whole population. So I'll stop there because there's a lot to unpack, but I do think it's discrimination, it's biases, it's unconscious biases, and so much more to unpack.
And I think it's good, talking about it and continuing to talk about it is how we fix it. And we're going to talk about how advancing women and advancing women of color must be a business imperative. And Becky's going to talk about that in just a few minutes in terms of research and guidance and consulting that she's provided to companies all over the country. I want to go back to mentorship and sponsorship, and specifically with Mia, because Mia, you have been a product, and we talked a lot about this. You had amazing mentors in your career, many of them men. So this is also a call out to men as well as women in terms of supporting each other versus competing with each other. And so as you think about mentorship and what you experienced, you're paying that forward now with very specific initiatives that you've done. I hear people say to me sometimes, you know, I'm a CEO, I'm X, I'm doing whatever. It's really hard to mentor people the way, you know, that I want to, and so I'm not really doing it right now. What do you say to that? You know, what can you share with our audience around how they can leave today and focus on, you know, whether it's one person or five, whether you're CEO or your chief people officer, if you don't have a formal sponsorship mentorship program, we also do allyship, like I said earlier, at Edmentum. If you don't have it, that's a problem. And so what should they do about it? So give us just a little bit of, you know, how you've done mentoring, you know, how you were mentored, and then specifically what you're doing to mentor others.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. I love the question so much because in many ways it's a call to action, isn't it? So yes, I have been the recipient of incredible mentoring that has shaped my outlook, just the right moments in my career. But even more critically, and Becky said this, I have been the beneficiary of great sponsorship. Mentors have helped me navigate complex and nebulous organizations. I work for many of those, but sponsors created opportunities for me, and there's a difference. So the first thing that I'd say is you think about being sponsor or mentor ready, is that you have to be someone that leaders take pride in. Because when anyone goes out on a limb for you, particularly in a sponsorship role, they also have to be very calculated in thinking, well, what's in it for me? And so leaders want to back those people who they see have potential, are hungry, have drive, work ethic, high EQ, and really also a track record of performance, or somebody that they see just has enormous potential. So in many ways, I'd say mentoring and sponsorship is earned, and you need to continue to show that you are worthy. So I think that's a fact. And then specific to role as mentors, if any leader says that they don't have time for mentoring, it means they do not put a high premium on pipeline management and succession planning, and that will break your organization. So you cannot run a business without deeply contemplating how you bring others along, because that's how you sustain business. It's part of business sustainability. But here's what I've also discovered about some of the best women mentors in particular. It's that they've made it their personal mission. Like they're obsessed about it. And I'm not always sure that instinct is innate, because of some of the messages we get also about being competitors. Like success is binary. If I succeed, it means you can't. So I'm the oldest of three daughters. I went to an all-women's college. So I was actually taught and learned how to be a good female friend and partner, and the importance of cultivating female leaders. But I don't know that just comes instinctively. But what we all know is that life and careers is full of these forks in the road, and having someone who has the hindsight and perspective to guide you, to help create self-awareness, to give you the confidence to choose the right path when you don't have it, can shape or change the trajectory of a young woman's career. And so we have to do it. And equally as important, we need to make sure our male executive colleagues are doing it effectively too. There's a formula. Everybody can learn to do it. I think you just have to be convicted that it is important enough. But it changes the trajectory of a woman's career. It also changes the landscape in your organization.
Yes, it does. I'm watching the comments here, and there's been a few that have come through around, you know, as executives, all of us taking risk on people that we really believe on. And that's really resonating with the audience in terms of how you talked about that. And then vice versa, as you are working your way up through your professional career, putting yourself out there. And when somebody offers you something, go for it. You know, you're not going to be perfect. You're not going to necessarily be completely successful. I call it failing fast, learn from it, move forward. So it's really resonating in terms of what folks are saying in the comment section around just both as the recipient of mentorship and then one that should mentor. And it's a call to action for all of us, right? If you are in an executive leadership position, nonprofit, for-profit, organizationally, and you are not currently mentoring someone and taking a chance on somebody, my comment to you is that you do have time, and it's time to pay it forward, because somebody took a bet on you, somebody took a risk on you earlier in your career, maybe recently, and you always have time to pay that forward and help the next woman advance in her career. So thank you for sharing that. Becky, I'm going to jump over to you and then back to Esther. You know, we had talked about, in the research that you've done, there were 5 data points that I wanted to share that you had provided me that I think is really important as we talk about this business imperative. And then Esther, I'll move over to you in terms of how you've made advancing Latina women a business imperative and the work that you've done. But the 5 that you shared that I think are really, really important for the audience to understand is women differentiate value. There's a value differentiation when you have women in leadership positions, C-suite positions within organizations. So first, balanced representation of men and women increases financial performance and productivity. So everybody hear that, financial performance and productivity. Women enhance transformational ideas and innovation, so that creativity, that innovation, ideation, welcoming new ideas and collaboration. Women represent 80% of the consumer base, so we have to remember that 80% of the consumer base is women. Half of the talented workforce in this country is women. We talked about that in terms of the entry-level positions. And women serve as mentor and role models very frequently, more often. So let's talk about those data points, and I think with the lens on help us understand why really focusing on the sponsorship and the advancement of women is a business imperative, and specifically the financial results aspect. What can you tell us about that?
Right. Well, Mia and Esther, thank you so much for your stories. I think they're so inspiring. And I would just say one thing to catapult on this prior conversation. You know, we hear from so many, we've coached and mentored so many women through our programs. And one of the things around mentorship, they have the opportunity to build those informal relationships and be an advocate for women, but they're too busy. So I'll just say one thing, busy is a choice, right? So I invite you all to be that active participant. But, you know, boy, you can just see it, you hear it, you read it all the time, that you have significant more women in senior leadership roles, 40 to 50% return on investment, shareholder value, profit and performance. So what's wrong with that? But we've seen those numbers out there for, I think, for a decade. And so I think, number one, here's the first thing that I would say, you don't see a lot of it. I think a lot of this is driven from our board. So if I am selecting a board in a nonprofit or a corporate environment, making sure that you have board members that are diverse, that get and understand the value proposition of diversity and inclusion and gender equity, and ensure that they examine and hold the organization accountable for gender equity, and creating more of those non-biased, neutral gender systems and processes for selection, hiring, talent, and going out and doing that assessment first. So I think we can't neglect the board members who can really have a lot of influence. So I think that's one thing. But we talk about the business case a lot. In general, when we kick off a gender equity inclusion effort across an ecosystem of a global company or national company, we start with the executives. And guess what? 80% of them are men. And so we give them the statistics, and they say, yeah, we send them the pre-reads. Yeah. And then I will just paraphrase what a great coach mentor of mine, CEO of a big utility company, said. You know, I think men get it, but it's not necessarily around the business case. It's a human business case. And I will just say something non-traditional is to create an experience for the men and the women to really not only have connection. And it's not the touchy-feely kind of thing. But if you have daughters, if you are looking at opportunities that other people, that you have from other people, why wouldn't you want to do the same? And I think that if you really want to connect with men, I think this is just a fair proposition, but you can also get into the business case. There's a good chance you won't be able to keep up your profitability margins, your return on investment, if you don't start clicking down and putting more attention on the diverse workforce and women. And your competitors are doing it. So one of the number one things that gets their attention is their customer. We're brought in a number of times because the customer is saying that we need more people showing up in our offices or on our Zooms or Microsoft Teams or whatever that look like us. And if not, we're going to somebody else. And those have been real, conversations that I've had with the CEOs. So we've better get ourselves on board. There's no question that there's the profitability piece, but if you are going to survive in today's environment, you need to innovate. And what drives innovation is diversity. And it's all kinds of diversity. It's gender diversity, ethnic diversity, it's cognitive diversity. And if you keep showing up with the same people at the table, you're going to get the same results, and you're going to be left behind from a competitive advantage perspective. And so I think those are really key points in terms of the business case. And I think the other part is around, you said it so well, and Esther, you touched on it, is talent. That top right quadrant of any leader, manager, executive is to develop and grow your talent for the next generation. And if we're not doing that, then there needs to be some conversation, incentive or not incentive, in terms of how we actually do that, which gets to the second part of accountability. If people don't see it as a business case, if people don't understand the why, and they're really busy, they're just not going to put time into it. And we've seen that a lot. And we all know that what gets measured really gets done. Yep. And so I think when we get down to that next level of leadership and that next level, they understand the metrics and what they're supposed to do, but they don't understand the why. So the first thing around accountability, this is just not a nice thing to do. It's a smart business thing to do, but it'll help you and your team to make better decisions, solve problems better, and really generate better ideas for the marketplace and our customers. And you will thrive more in your teams if you have that diversity. And so really setting what I call a metric frameworks around accountability, around succession, which I mentioned, around hiring and recruitment, around sponsorship. How many of your leaders are actually sponsoring and committed to that? Around performance management, and looking at ways to neutralize those practices to making sure that we're bringing a slate of all qualified talent that meet an objective criterion. And so a lot of times this accountability is driven by old criterion that actually has riddled in it bias. And so we need to make sure that managers are operating with the objective criterion to select and hire, build the right talent. The other piece was just touched on, bias is everywhere. We as human beings have bias, right? We have bias about ourselves. We have bias about situations and people. That's a human fact, right? But I think when it comes to bias and it's limiting the ability to bring up our talent and the best potential of our talent, that's an issue. And so what we call in our consulting model is create a learning culture. Create a learning culture where people understand what biases are, where they come from, how we click into our normal habits in 18 seconds or less, and really give them the tools, the techniques to mitigate that bias and put it in play. So I think beyond just awareness, we need to operationalize bias in day-to-day conversations, feedback, how we give our performance reviews and selection and hiring. A lot of times they just don't know, and then we need to hold them accountable for that. So I think the accountability is really important, but the learning culture, understanding what inclusion is and what behaviors look like in terms of inclusion, and then giving them the toolkit to really move forward and engage with that. And then last is we need to engage men. Men are 88% of executives, leadership, senior leadership, board members. And so if we don't bring them into the conversation and invite them in, it's going to be very difficult to achieve these goals.
Right.
And so advice for women is to invite men in, bring them into these conversations that you're having in your networks and your forums, help to orientate them and feel comfortable with this conversation. And then, invite them to be allies, as we've all to be a part of the solution. Most of the men that we have asked to engage in this, they said, I'd love to, but I don't know how. So let's help with that.
Thank you, Becky. So Esther, Becky made a point just a few minutes ago around the governance structure, right? And so welcoming diversity, demanding diversity, right? So when you've got a governance structure, so specifically boards that are highly diverse, working with the CEO to build a diverse board, a diverse executive team, one part of the many things that you have done for this country and in your leadership position is that you have worked for decades now to get Latina women into C-suite positions and into the boardrooms. Can you walk us through how you've done that. Like, what specifically have been strategies or initiatives that you've taken on that have worked for you in terms of advancing Latinas to the C-suite as well as into board of director positions?
Thanks, Jamie. Well, first, Jamie, I need to sound the alarm bells for Latinas. I mean, look, we're nowhere where we need to be for all women. And as I mentioned early on, Latinas are invisible in the C-suite and public company boards. We are less than 1% of those posts. And, you know, even though Latinos are 2 in 10 Americans, we contribute 25% of the nation's GDP, the growing consumer and employee base. It really is, I think both corporate boards and C-suites are dangerously disconnected from their customer and employee base. And you really need to be intentional for all women categories, but especially Latinas. Our research has found that, for example, in California, when there was a big push to, with a new law to add women on boards, 78% were white, and the group that was least tapped were Latinas, even though there's phenomenal talent. There's less than 1% on California company boards, even though we are 40% of the population. It is shocking. I mean, the data that you showed us in terms of the wage gap is shocking. We've seen these statistics, and sometimes we kind of, see it, oh, there it is again. I mean, we really should be outraged that Latinas have the largest pay gap, earning 55 cents for every dollar earned by white men. And you know what? Just as alarming is that Latinas also have the largest gap. Latinas with bachelor's degrees earn 37% less than white men on average. So it's across the board. And so there is a myth that, they can't find them. And I think that's really not relevant. We had both, for example, the chairman and CEO of Xerox, John Vincenten, said that his company strives to mirror the markets they serve, and that extends to the executive leaders and the board of directors. Just this month, Mallory Hobson, the chair of Starbucks, said that U.S. companies that fail to add people of color to their leadership are committing corporate suicide. The marketplace is so dynamic and diverse that this is a real alarm bell. And so certainly more needs to be done. This is not a zero-sum game. There's room at the table for us all, and it's just good for business. So at the Latino Corporate Directors Association, we take a very comprehensive approach on everything we do. We have a board-ready institute, and we work with our Latinas, one, coaching them on their board bio. And, certainly they want to tap their network and how to have a conversation with your colleagues about, what you bring to the table and bringing value to the companies. But second, it's, we bring them in and they're part of a broad network of corporate directors, CEOs, search firms, private equity. So instantly their network quadruples and have, can continue to build and grow their connections. I completely agree. We need more connections between women of color and white women, between people of color and white men, and certainly, a support network there as well. There's governance. We do coaching for interviewing for boardroom. And our members are committed to paying it forward, and they help do a lot of the coaching directly. So it's a real wraparound services and benefits. We are a resource and work with search firms, private equity, directly with nom-gov committees and boards, and we will source lists of exceptional candidates that they're looking for. We're writing to companies. We wrote to companies in California and are actively engaging and talking to the board leaders and connecting them to, again, really top talent. You know, today the pandemic and the social unrest to end the systemic racism in our country has laid bare the need to really have transparency, accountability, and really measurable accountability, like what Becky was saying. But you can't just talk about diversity. You really have to break it down to each of the racial and ethnic subgroups because there are differences. If you lump them together, our research has found that Latinas are left behind. You know, we talk about the fact that, you know, when women get a job description and they're more critical about, oh, gee, I have to meet all the criteria. Well, for Latinas and women of color, we don't get the job descriptions. Like, we're not seeing them. So how are we making sure that those that really should be seeing these job descriptions get them? Don't assume that because, you know, again, that's the experience of white women. It's not the experience of Latinas and women of color. You know, same thing with the boardroom. The recommendation for women is tap your network. And absolutely, you want to get out there and, you know, make sure that people know you're looking for a board. But when you say tap your network, you might not have as robust of a network. So how do we help them build a network first and then tell them to tap the network? There's a lot of differences in how we're coaching women that really need more intentionality. I would say that the last thing is, you know, as I mentioned, Latinas are feeling invisible. For all conferences, especially women's conferences, if you don't have featured speakers that are Latinas or on panels, Latinas don't see themselves and they feel invisible. And it is a real kind of continues. These are just some tips because sometimes we don't realize, and what we do, we're leaving people out and not bring them into the conversation. So some very simple things that could be done. I think slates for both C-suite and board candidates should have all diversity. If you have a situation where you have all white boards or all white C-suites, you're going to find tremendous talent. And what we're hearing from some of the boards we're working with, we're like, wow, well, we have two great candidates here. And we know if we don't tap these two diverse candidates now, they're going to be snatched up. So it's goes to a deeper level that I think we're even thinking about. So I challenge us to really be more intentional and really think about, again, how we are sending a message with our own women's organizations. Are we being inclusive? And are we showcasing Latinas as featured speakers, women of color as featured speakers? And if you're looking for featured speakers, I have a ton of phenomenal women and happy to be a resource and part of the solution.
Great. And with that, we are a little bit over our time, so that is a great call to action for us to end. Just want to thank the amazing panelists today. Thank you, Becky. Thank you, Mia. Thank you, Esther. I hope everybody heard today some real personal stories. I think personal stories about how amazing women get to where they are is an excellent way for all of you to just envision what we can be doing. Our call to actions, we heard many of them today. Want to thank everybody for joining us. Thank you again, panelists. We're going to go to break and then we'll be to the next panel. Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to the next panel. This is building the C-suite talent pipe with Barb. Barb, all yours.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And rather than giving a formal introduction of my panel members, I asked each panel member to just give me words that they live by, and that's how I want to introduce them. And so I want to start with Suba Berry. She is the Chief Executive Officer of Ceramont. And the word she lives by is she hires people who can act and behave like owners and not like renters. And I love that because basically she empowers everyone that she employs. Kimber Matazzaro is the C200 chairman, and she develops leaders to have a clear vision and the ability to be decisive. There is no time for hesitancy. Rosina Rasiopol is president and CEO of Women Unlimited. And the word she lives by, she develops leaders who deliver results for their organizations and themselves. I'm Barb Bruno. I'm the president of HR Search and Good as Gold Training. And I believe in helping others embrace change and realize their potential as leaders. I've had the wonderful opportunity to interact with these women, and I know you're here to hear them today. And so let's get into questions because this is such a vital topic. My first question I'm going to address to Kimber. Let's see here, hold on a second here. The question is, how can we help women how can we help women gain exposure to P&L in finance, who are not in finance and operational roles, so that when they get those roles, they are prepared? Kimber?
Thank you, Barb. So it's so important that we really are intentional about how we educate the women, especially, it used to be opportunity and time and place. It should not be that. Everybody should have the opportunity. So it really is a call to action to corporations to have programs and design mentors and sponsors within the organization to really make sure those women in the pipeline are ready to go. I know that when I was in that role, I'll share a little story. I was running a $500 million budget, and there was an opportunity for over $1 billion P&L role. I went and asked for it. And the first thing the CEO of the company said was, well, you don't know how to run a P&L. And I thought, well, I'm not going to have that opportunity because I don't know how to run a P&L. And he doesn't even know if that's an issue. So
Kimber, we've lost your audio. Can anybody else hear her?
No, I couldn't hear her either.
Yeah, Kimber, your audio went off. We can't hear you. So I don't know if you can fix this, the host, if you can fix this. Okay. Let's go to Suba. And why don't you comment on that topic? So, how can we help women get that P&L exposure and experience?
See, I would like to actually have women think really creatively about what are those early opportunities where you almost get a sense and a taste of what it is to be revenue producing. So I'm thinking about roles, early career roles in sales and business development, the kinds of opportunities where you actually get to, meet with clients and know how the company makes its revenues. And I think not everybody will want to continue on that pathway, but if you never give them that exposure in early career, chances are that they're not going to pick that up in mid-career. So I would urge companies to think about job rotations in early career where they are exposing both men and women across the board to these frontline roles where they are actually directly A, producing revenues, or B, meeting with and connecting with clients.
Absolutely. Rosina, would you like to comment on that?
Not surprisingly, I agree so much with the points that Suba and Kimber have made. I believe everyone needs to understand how they create value for their company and for their customers. And I remember early in my career when I was leading an HR function, our president made a comment that everyone in the company needs to understand how they serve our customer. And I thought to myself, well, I'm an HR, I'm a staff role. I don't serve the customer. And then I thought, wait a minute, if I'm not serving the customer, then I'm of no value to the organization. So how do I, in a staff role, create value? And we need to be able to have that mindset, but also articulate that. I'm doing this because I'm impacting the company in this way. And I think from what Suba said, if we can introduce that into our conversation early in our career, that understanding of value and impact, we then will be drawn to those opportunities that create greater impact for the organization.
Absolutely. Kimber, I want to see if we've got your audio back, because I didn't want to not hear all the wonderful things you were going to say. You got cut off after the first couple of sentences. We still can't hear you, unfortunately.
I'm going to add a little something. Perhaps Kimber can dial in if there is a phone that she can dial into. But what I also wanted to say is I want to tie it back to the way you introduced me. If you want people to behave like owners, not like hired hands, then every single employee in every single company must have two roles, whether or not it says that in their title or job description. One is everyone is a salesperson on behalf of the company, because you are a brand ambassador, and I don't care what your title is. Okay, so you have to be able to market, sell, talk about your company, what it does in a way that draws people into it. And number two, every single person is a recruiter on behalf of the company. So if you are not constantly screening to see who else in your network really belongs in your company, and you have not been given the authority to say, hey, when you find great candidates, bring them to us. That's why I say every company needs their employees to walk in like owners every single day.
Absolutely. Kimber, we see you're back, and we're hoping you have audio this time. Why don't we try again? We heard the first couple of sentences. We'd love to hear your comment on this topic. We have no audio. No audio.
Sorry.
I have no idea what's going on. Sorry about that. And so I'm hoping that maybe there's a line that Kimber can dial in, if somebody could get her that number, so we could get her back in on this discussion. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to question number 2 while we try to solve the Kimber audio. Let's start with you, Rosina. What support and guidance do you think managers need to receive to ensure that they have the skills to support women's development and provide meaningful feedback and stretch assignments?
So, yeah, I think the most essential skill for managers is the skill of coaching and developing and providing the aspirational guidance to their teammates, men and women. What's critical for women is that most often women are getting more transactional feedback. Here's how you did on this job or this project, and they're not being encouraged to think about, how can I be growing my skills, applying my knowledge in a different way as I'm looking to grow my career within the organization. So managers need to, of course, have those key coaching skills, but also be curious about what the potential could be for this individual. How can they grow their expertise and not hold on to them because they're a good executor of tasks, but also nurture their growth, maybe beyond your own area, to hopefully encourage them to think broader about the possibilities for their career.
No, I totally agree. And it's interesting because I've seen companies actually use AI to look inside rather than going outside to a search firm to fill every job, look internally, and where department heads can't feel like they own their employees. Like often if somebody has a great employee, they hold them back because they don't want to lose them, not realizing that if they don't advance them, they're going to lose them anyway. You have to go internally and look at all the talent in every department and open those kinds of opportunities to obviously women, minorities, and anyone who's qualified. I would love, Suba, would you like to comment on this topic?
It's an interesting way of looking at it in terms of what kind of support needs to be given. But organizationally, you can have some structures in place, especially for women, with early stretch assignments, global rotations, wherever possible, because I think what that allows both the company and the employee to do is to really test their appetite for risk and their appetite for tolerating, how much of it is something that they can take on. And I say this because, when I started in my career, an early career, by the time you had to be in your job a certain number of years before you got those stretch assignments and global rotations. And you know what? Those they came right in the middle of your child-rearing years. And then you say to yourself, oh my God, it's going to be too complicated, et cetera, et cetera. So you opt out of it even before getting a chance with it. What if that was done in early career? What would that do in terms of offering you that opportunity to test it out? And if you really like it, you now have a taste of it and you can ask for more. The other one is really when you do place talent in these stretch roles, you have to think about the kind of scaffolding you offer. This quote came from Nancy Cantor. She is the, I think, chancellor of Rutgers University in Newark. And she said, think about it. When you place a woman, it's like placing her in this sort of high roll up there in a high-rise building with no scaffolding to come out. And you have her on the ledge there. And if she makes it, she makes it. If she doesn't, think about what will happen. It's a terrible visual, but the reality is very often with women, that's what seems to happen, is that scaffolding isn't provided. How is failure handled? Is it career ending very often? Or is that treated as a learning experience in that process? So I think it's really important to find a way that organizations can build a culture and readiness to include these. And then especially thinking about when you bring on somebody as a lateral hire, especially a woman or woman of color in a senior role or even a mid-career role, if you don't provide the scaffolding, you don't have that sort of structure of support for them, chances are you're leaving them, hanging out there to dry.
Right, and the failure becomes fatal. It ends there in their career chances. Kimber, I see you're back. We actually moved on to the second question, which I would love to get your feedback on, and that's what support and guidance do you think managers need to receive to ensure they have the skills to support women development, provide meaningful feedback, and stretch assignments? So let's see if we've got your audio. We don't have your audio. No, we still don't have your audio. I have no idea. And this makes me sad because Kimber has so many wonderful things to say. So hopefully they can still figure this out before we're done with this call. So I'm going to go back to Rosina and Suba. If somebody does not have this in place, what type of training do you think they need to be giving their managers?
I think they need to expose managers to people that do not look like them. So in our program, we have a lot of men that participate as mentors. And for many of them, especially the first time that they participate as a mentor, it is eye-opening to them to better understand the challenges and the way women are experiencing organizations, right? The barriers. And so part of being an effective manager is understanding that everyone's experience is somewhat different. I can't assume that Suba and I have the same experience. I need to meet her where she's at and try and cultivate ideas from her that align with her career goals. That's that development coaching skill that is so critical for managers. And to be curious about how is she experiencing the organization so that as a manager, I can remove the barriers that might be in her way from really contributing at her fullest. And also create those introductions or opportunities that round out her experience or exposure to the organization. So I think being a coach and being curious about what that person is experiencing and meeting them where they are and not judging it as good, bad, right, or wrong.
Absolutely. Suba, did you want to add to that?
Kimber is back, and I want her to see. I think she's on her phone, and I'm hoping this is the third time's a charm.
Absolutely.
You can hear me now.
Yay! Oh my God! Yay! We can hear you. Okay. Kimber, I almost want to go back to the first question that we asked you because I know you had some valuable input. Do you want to go back and answer that first question we asked, or would you like to go on to our second one? Your choice.
I don't want to go back. That's fine. Let's go on to the second. I apologize.
All right, not a problem. Then let me ask you, what support and guidance do you think managers need to receive to ensure they have the skills to support women's development and provide meaningful feedback and stretch assignments?
The company really has to adopt a learning culture and make sure that every level, every person that has the opportunity within that company is receiving mentorship programs, external and internal and external. I think it's so important. Companies like to keep their employees so close. And I think they need to realize that there are so many opportunities outside the company to give them this type of education, and within the company, giving them that mentorship and that guidance. And it's really designing programs and making sure you do it. You know, it's one thing saying we promoting and advancing our women in the company, but it's something to really be intentional about it and set up and design programs and opportunities for them.
Right. And what I'd like to add too, I'm seeing that many companies are finally coming up with performance objectives for women, because so often they give them a stretch assignment, they give them a new role, but they don't really tell them what they expect. They just put them in this role. And when they're clear, like these are the 3 to 5 things that we would like you to achieve, it just helps their manager, it helps everybody involved know where to aim this training and know exactly what's expected of the person that has a stretch assignment, so that there's not a disconnect between what they're told they're supposed to do and what actually is expected. Suba, I want to go on to our next question. How do you create, and I like that Kimber brought up mentorship because that leads us to this next question. How do you create a culture of mentorship and sponsorship at all levels in an organization?
You know, that's a great question. I've always thought about in my early career that mentorship was from someone that is more experienced than you, senior to you, etc. And then I began actually through the course of my early career, especially with guidance from a senior woman executive in my company. She said to me, you know, there is something called situational mentoring. And I was like, well, what is that? She said, you don't have to expect one person to be that coach guide for you all the time. You go to specific people with specific issues, but frame the issue, ask them for guidance on it, go to them because you think they do it well. And doing that sort of with a number of people will do a couple of things for you. It'll allow you to build those mentoring relationships across the board with a number of people. And there may be 1 or 2 who end up being, you know, long-term, persistent, consistent mentors to you. But the reality is, chances are people will hop on and off because people don't have the bandwidth and time to mentor a large number of people. That was the first one. The second one is knowing that as women, we need more mentors than fewer. Just having 1 or 2 strong mentors, not enough. You need to have many more. And the same goes for sponsors and sponsorship, and I'll get to that in a second. The last thing is, mentors do not need to be somebody that is above you or senior to you or more experienced than you. You can have peer mentors, you can have subordinate mentors, people that can teach you something or be of value to you, come in all shapes and sizes, genders, levels, etc. So embrace what it is that they can give you as opposed to what form they come in. And I will call out and say the best experiences I've had are with actually somebody who worked for me, who mentored me in mid-career and said to me, you know, you're way too in the details. You got to let me do what I do well. You focus on doing what you do well. And I will always remember Nancy Santiago for that guidance she gave me. She put me in my place, but boy, did she teach me a valuable lesson, and she remains a good friend to now. And peer mentors, people that are at your level, but with whom you can build that kind of mentoring relationships where there's give and take. That is also powerful. And I did that successfully, you know, in mid-career, and that has kind of stood me in good stead. Then you come to sponsorship, which is, you know, what can you do to get sponsored? What can organizations do to create strong sponsorship programs? And I would say to you that one of the things we did at one of the companies I worked at was to create sort of level lunches and meetings, going 2-3 levels below the leader to get to know who is in the organization, because you can't contrive sponsorship. You can't force people to say, oh, I expect you to sponsor XYZ. There's got to be some innate, you know, ability to say, I see a talent in that person. I would like that person on my team doing something, and that, but how do you create the opportunity for that? That opportunity creation can be contrived, can be shaped by an organization.
Absolutely. Kimber, I want you to jump in on this about the culture of mentorship and sponsorship at all levels.
Exactly what Suba said is so important to have levels. The other thing is really to have peer advocates. I think peer advocates are really key in an organization, because when it's time for them to advance, they're going to go to those peers and ask them, how is it like to work with Kimber? How is she as a so peer, we as leaders, and even when we're in that middle management, we're so focused on ourselves, forgetting that we need those advocates. So among mentors and sponsors, I think it's so important to have peer advocates.
Absolutely. Rosina, would you comment on that, please?
So this speaks to my heart. I did research on the ways in which women form mentoring relationships that impact their career growth and leadership advancement. And the one thing I found is that women who, with intention, create these relationships gain the most from these mentoring conversations, right? It's the difference between having an interesting conversation and having a relationship where I learn and grow, right? So it's important for women to understand, how do I form relationships that matter with mentors, with having a network that affirms my capabilities so that I know how to apply my skills in the organization? Do I have a network and relationships that broaden my thinking, broadens my perspective? We talk about creating a challenge network, right? I love talking with the women on the screen because they help me think differently. They don't just tell me I'm right. They broaden my thinking and help me grow and think differently. And so it also helps us identify who are the people I should be connecting with, who are the influencers. So it's important for women to understand, what can I do to reach out and form these relationships so that I'm getting the input that I need to guide my thinking as I grow my career.
All right, I want to ask you ladies a follow-up question here. I'm going to start with you, Suba. What if I'm listening to this panel and our company just lets a supervisor maybe be a mentor? It's not an official mentorship program, and I realize we're really falling short in this area. I'm listening to the three of you going, wow, this is something we are not doing at all. What would you suggest if I'm listening to you right now, and I know we have no mentorship program, and I know I've got women that could really use a mentor? Where do I start? Because I think if we can give people action items during our panel, we're really doing them justice. So I want to ask the three of you. I'm going to start with you, Suba. I have no mentorship program. Where do I start?
So I would say to you, there are lots and lots of best practice ideas in the marketplace, and we can make those resources available to you. I know that we at Diversity Best Practices at Seramount will share them with WBC to share with the broader audience. But I'm going to give a very specific idea. When I was at Merrill mid-career, one of the things I realized that women struggled with being able to advocate for themselves, speak about their successes in really compelling ways. And yet we are really great at speaking about someone else. We do it eloquently, we do it really well. And we were at a women's gathering, and there were four of us, myself and three others, each worked in a different part of the organization. One was in investment banking, one was in trading and sales, one was in the commercial bank, and I was in wealth management. And we were all doing really well, but we were not well known outside of our respective silos. So we decided, and we really got along, we liked each other. We decided we would get together once a month for a 2-hour lunch, and non-negotiable. Each one of us had a half hour to brief the other three on what we were working on and what we were challenged by. And over the course of the next month, the next 30 days, each one of us spoke about the other three. We spoke about them eloquently. We spoke about them with facts and data. We spoke about their successes. We spoke about how they overcame challenges. We made them look like heroes. And guess what happened? Just in the course of a year, we got known across each other's organization. So when I would speak about the other three, my manager, my leadership wanted them to come in and speak to our women and our leaders. So it was really a powerful way to get people known. And ultimately, of course, all of us have had great career successes. But what's important about that was underlying that was a generosity of spirit, a willingness to be interested enough in someone else to learn about them and to generously speak about them. And that is easy to do. You can set up your group of 4 or your group of 3 or whatever number works for you within your organization. So I would say to you, as individuals who are on this call, think about how you create your own structure. As an organization, you have to think about, if there are so many different ways of incubating this kind of mentorship across the board, how do I start with 1 or 2? And we will make resources and tools available to you, but you've got to pick up and expend the energy to actually put it in place.
Wonderfully said. Kimber, I would love to hear your opinion on this.
It's so important, like this is in within the.
Hey, you're going in and out again, Kimber. Can you get closer to your microphone? You're going in and out.
In designing a program internally, I think what I would do if I was sitting here watching this, I would encourage the women in my organization to join outside women's. And the reason I do that is not 1 or 2 mentorships that they need. It's groups of women that can help support them. And it's proven that groups of women in communities can really help lift up. And I think that that is a lost level, meaning when you're at that manager level and moving up, it tends to be forgotten because you're so busy working on your career that you're thinking, I don't have time to join other communities. I don't have time to be in a women's organization. And to me, that is the most important time to do it. So I would recommend that they start looking at some of the other organizations that are out there and how they can foster those relationships with other women.
Barbara's muted.
I'm muted? Oh, okay, now I'm unmuted. Okay. We're just muting each other. Okay, Rosina, what is your input?
You know, when I did my research on mentoring relationships, I was curious about what the women learn post their program experience about the value of these relationships. And what I found was that the women sought out individuals informally to create relationships that gave them information about their business and provided them avenues to get feedback about themselves, right? Their skills and development. So what I would recommend, if your organization doesn't have a mentoring program, a formal program, I would reach out to individuals, people that maybe you've come across in meetings or in your interactions, and set up an informal chat, a conversation about their experience, how long they've been with the company, what's their perspective on the business, to informally create a relationship that helps you broaden your understanding of your organization, maybe providing you some avenues to get some guidance and some feedback on for yourself. You have the opportunity. Most people, when you reach out to them, will respond. Mm-hmm. You know, they'll take that 5 minutes, 10 minutes to have an informal conversation. We have that as part of our ingrained programs to help the women learn how do I create these bridges of understanding for the business and for myself. So if you don't have it informally, create it yourself. I agree with what Kimber and Suba has said. Don't wait for someone to do it for you. You can create a group of individuals who can give you that guidance and feedback informally to make sure that you're getting that insight, and make sure it's not people that all look like you, are in the same function, think like you. We don't need people to tell us that we're right all the time. In business, we need people that challenge our thinking to broaden our perspective so that we can see the opportunities that lie ahead.
That's perfect. The only other thing I'd like to add is one of the best things I've used my whole life are mastermind groups. And so I would suggest that any woman out there that doesn't have a mentor, doesn't have a sponsorship program, that start a mastermind group and find the most successful woman in insurance or real estate. Look at other people that are very successful. Again, like Rosina said, that don't look like you, and just form a mastermind group. And you decide as a group, are you going to meet once a month? I've been in a mastermind group for the last 15 years, and I probably change groups about every year. You know, because after a while, and we meet, you know, once a month, and it's just everybody goes around and poses a problem, and then you get the input of people that are not in your profession, and they're very objective, and they have nothing to lose or gain, you know, because they're not in your organization, And I've learned so much from people in other professions that have helped me in my profession. So if you don't have something internally, don't wait for things to happen. You know, my mentors were all men because in the field I was in, there were no women for a long time. That's why I always mentor other women, because I didn't have that. You know, but if you don't have that, don't sit there and wait for it to happen. So if you're in a company now and you don't have a mentor, you don't have a sponsorship program, start one, start a mastermind group. You can do something as an individual. Let's get to our last question.
Barbara, can I add one thing?
Absolutely.
What I wanted to add was, yes, you're getting mentored, you've gotten even sponsored. Let's assume that's happening. You have an obligation to do something that I often feel people miss out on. And one is keeping your mentors and sponsors informed about how things are going. So you went to someone for advice. Have you ever gone back to them to say, this is how it went? This is how, thank you so much, or this didn't work. Can you suggest something else? You need to make sure that you keep them in the loop on it, number one. And number two, even if that one situation is done, find a way regularly every 6 months or so, find an organization tool that allows you to keep them in the loop, even though you don't go back to them consistently. If you'll be amazed as to what comes back to you when you keep people included in your progress. People want to help other people. And this is the way you will stand out and be different than others who kind of don't keep their mentors and sponsors in the loop.
It's always nice to hear a success story and have somebody say thank you. It just is. And we need to form lifelong relationships. I think we'd all agree on that. You know, when you've got these wonderful people in your lives, you want to form lifelong relationships. Kimber or Rosina, you have anything else to add before we go to our next question on this topic?
I just want to add one thing you mentioned, Barb, was having a male mentor. I think every woman should have a male mentor, at least one, because it's so important to get a male's view of the issues you may be having. And it just helps round out everything. Let's not exclude the men. It's so important for us to be mentored by them.
I agree. I agree. So how can organizations identify and view potential in an unbiased way that allows them to provide development experiences to women and women of color? Let's start that discussion with Rosina.
So I think I want to echo some of the things you may have heard already. I think it's important to start these conversations early, right? And because we know that for most women, they start their career and start their career thinking about their work, and they're not really thinking about how do I build the relationships or my understanding of the business. And so by the time that first promotion comes, they're already behind their male colleagues. So I think for organizations, it's beginning in that early stage to help women understand beyond the work that they're actually doing. How do I understand the business I'm a part of? How do I grow? How do I grow my capabilities in the organization? How do I navigate? How do I need to cooperate with people in the organization to get things done? You know, learning the rules of engagement, if you will, in the organization. And that needs to start early. I think secondly, it's also helping women, all women, understand, what do I need to do? How do I own my career advancement? How do I be much more of an advocate for myself? How do I share my expertise? Often when I'm with groups of women, they'll say, you know, I don't like talking about myself. It's not something I'm accustomed to doing. And I like to reframe how we think about this as women. In organizations, leaders need to understand the resources available to solve the organization's problems. If we as women keep a secret of what we're bringing to the table, how can anybody put us in the game? So let us find a way, a comfortable way for us to share what we're bringing to the table so people can tap into our expertise and our knowledge.
Okay, let's go to Rosina.
That was Rosina.
I'm sorry, I meant Suba. I'm looking at Suba and calling on Rosina. Suba, what is your opinion?
I love her name, Rosina. I
do too. I do too.
So, you know, I think, firstly, I think that I've always thought anybody who is different in any way you expect you're actually hired for that difference. You're hired because you bring something different to the table. But then there is an organizational culture that almost seems to demand conformity. You step in the door and you have to become what they expect of you in the organization. So I think that that first piece in the part of the organization to think about, how do I bring that tone down? How do I allow people to be their whole selves when they come in, as opposed to getting them to feel like they need to fit into this image of what you need to be when you come in the organization? So I would say that's one. The other part is, as you think about, let's assume people come in and find their place in roles, they end up in tech or HR or ops or legal, etc. You know, when you think about building pipelines for leadership, how can you think outside the box? What are the skill set that these women acquire in their experience, whether it's in tech, HR, ops, or legal, or others? What do they acquire that can then, and how do you augment and fill in the gaps? Because risk taking as it relates to how you make a sale isn't the only way to learn about risk management. There is risk management in legal, in ops, in HR, in tech. So the notion of, you know, how do you formulate how a person's skill set is built, and then find a way to harness that towards a leadership role, is really what companies and organizations need to do. And, you know, actually, Rosina and I and our organizations are going to collaborate in terms of looking for creating a white paper for just that, to say, how can you look at this differently? Look at these competencies differently than you traditionally do.
Mm-hmm. Kimber, would love to hear your opinion.
It's really on the leadership of the organization. When you look at traditional corporations, you know, there's always a right-hand person. There should be a right hand, a left hand, a left foot, a right foot. There should be many options. It shouldn't be one individual that has that opportunity. So I think it's up to a leader to look throughout the lateral part of the organization and the leadership team and say, every single one of these people can be the next leader. Right. And go down at each level and be intentional about how they're going to advance them. So it shouldn't be just known by everybody who that person's going to be. It's educating them and giving everybody the same opportunities.
Absolutely. It was interesting. I was called by a company last year and they wanted me to teach their recruiters how to recruit women in diversity, because they realized their C-suite was all white males and they have government contracts. And so they called me in to teach their recruiters to recruit diversity. And it was interesting because after 2 hours, I said, your recruiters are great at recruiting diversity. It's your interviewing process. So it's not only being intentional, it's looking at every part of how do you get these women in the pipeline? Because what I realized was there were a couple people, without realizing their unconscious bias and emotion, they were screening out, you know, and if I like somebody, I can find reasons why I'm going to screen them in. If I don't, I can find very legitimate reasons why I'm screening them out. So I suggested they do panel interviews where nobody has that power. And now they have 4 women in executive roles in this company within a year. And it was just changing their interviewing process. I want to ask all of you ladies one last question. And we didn't prepare this question, but I think it's important. And I would love to ask all of you this one last question. We all know that as of January 2020, for the first time, women were the majority of the workforce for 1 month. For January of 2020. And then, of course, COVID hit and women are leaving the workforce at 5 times the rate of men. And so we lost all that momentum that we had built up for all these years. And we're talking about how do you get women in the pipeline? Women are facing very, very different problems right now. And 5 times more men left, 5 times more many women left than men. So how do we get these women back in the pipeline? What can companies do to get these women back in the workforce? What creative ideas would you have? Rosina, I'm going to start with you. Any ideas that you can give people listening to us on how to get these women back into that pipeline?
Well, I think that so often the conversation is an either or conversation. Either the woman is working or she's staying at home. And I hear that from a lot of the women that are participating in our programs. And what we focused on is how do you create the and? Like, I can be a working mother. I can work and also balance my life. And here's the ways I need to do it. What I'm hearing from the companies that we partner with is they have increased kind of their strategy of the support they provide families and the needs of their employees, so that they can bring their whole self to work, but also they can not sacrifice their personal needs in view of what's needed for work. And what I think organizations need to do is take a step back and say, what do I need to do to make sure that my employees can bring their best selves to work, but also satisfy their personal needs as well? I would also say for women, think about, what does it look like when you work? What are your needs? And be able to ask for what you need in the organization that you're a part of. Most companies want to bring you into their organization. And if they understand your needs for this moment in time, 9 out of 10 will accommodate anything that's reasonable.
Kimber, I'm going to go to you next. Okay, you're muted. Can you unmute, Kimber? Okay.
COVID brought us a silver lining of knowing that we can adapt this technology and work from home. And I think as women, we need to take advantage of that and realize, and we've shown that we can work and get the same amount of work, if not more, and output. I think companies need to realize that, and as women leaders, let them do that. I think as the kids go back to school, we'll start to see the women going back into the workforce. I think at the time women were faced with, how do I take care of my home and how do I at the same time take care of my job? And that really was a crossroads, and they made a decision. I think that will definitely change when everything goes back to normal.
It was interesting. The women that work for me that have smaller children, what I said to them was, you're a part-time teacher and I know it. So you've got to teach during the day. Anybody that had children from 1st grade to 6th grade, they were a part-time teacher. So what I said is, this is what you need to get done this week. I don't care what hours you work to get it done. As long as it's done by Friday, if you've got to teach 3 or 4 hours during the day, I don't want you to feel pulled that you've got to be doing everything. I want you to do is simultaneously try to keep an 8-year-old in a seat on a Zoom call, and so I think it's the flexibility. What I'm hearing from so many women is they just need companies to be more flexible. And that word is very different for each woman, in their situations. Suba, what would your solution be?
Flexibility is key. We need to offer our women flexibility.
Absolutely.
So we actually at Saramount did research. We did surveys around what is happening with women last April, last September, and again this January. And one of the things that actually that data showed us is that women, even if mom and dad were both home, women were bearing the brunt of anything that had to do with all of the things that needed to be done at home. So that is fact. Let's just put that out of the way and accept that. The one thing that made a difference was when managers showed consideration. The defining factor was women whose managers actually checked in on their workload, gave them the flexibility to get the work done at their own pace, checked in on their mental health and well-being and stress levels. There, it made a difference. These women said, we're going to stay with our companies, and we're going to continue on. Where they didn't get that support is where they buckled. So I would say a huge call out to all people managers, especially those with women. And we found sadly in our data that men with children got shown greater consideration than women with children. And that was disappointing. Lastly, I would say to you that one of the lessons I took away is I maintain a sort of a work-related journal where I note down every appointment every day, highlights of what happened and so on. And I turned that into a crisis journal during these last 14 months or so. And what I did with that was each week, I not only went back and looked at the meetings I had, I really started to note down lessons learned. And I was able to then translate that into a value proposition for why I was a great risk manager, how I was decisive, how I was a leader who was able to lead through some very, very difficult times. And I think that could become your calling card back to your organization to say, I know it was hard, but you really want to know what I learned and took away and why I'm going to be amazing at that next stretch assignment or promotion or whatever it is that you're going to give me at work. I'm prepared. I've taken all those experiences and they've been translated into a powerful, that's my secret superpower in terms of what I'm going to bring to you. So I would say to you, don't waste a crisis. And this is a great opportunity to take all those learnings and turbocharge them to help you drive your career forward.
Yes, we all became. Go on. I'm sorry, Rosanna. Go on.
I want to add something because Suba brought up the managers. We did research over this period of COVID to understand how the women were navigating this time and how their managers were supporting the women in their development during this time. And we found the same thing that Zuba talked about. The managers became much more aware, or I would say attuned to, the challenges that women were experiencing. And because of that, they had a higher level of empathy for their situation. And here's the part that I thought was so fascinating. They worked with the women to identify to provide clarity of focus. Here are the things that you need to pay attention to. This other stuff, not that important. So they were able to help the women kind of clear their plate. Of all the things that you're worried about, these are the things that are important. Other things can wait. And so I think sometimes women tend to put it all on them, especially during crisis. I need to fix everything. And it's important to help for managers to help clear the path and help the women prioritize where their attention really needs to be for the work that they're doing. That ends up, the women are less stressed out. They feel better about where they're contributing, and also have a better support system with their manager.
Absolutely. One of the things that we implemented was we had every employee write down their 6 priorities they were going to finish the next day, every evening before they left work. And so, because everything is so distracting, it takes you away from what you need to do. And so just by writing down 6 priorities every day, it also showed their managers what they felt their priority was. And sometimes their manager would go, don't worry about that. I've got that. I've got your back. You do this. So just having them share, especially when everybody was working remote, that never worked remote before, forcing the issue, just write down the 6 priorities you're going to finish tomorrow. It made everybody's life easier. What I want to bring to everybody's attention, the 4 women you're looking at right now, all 4 of us belong to WBC, the Women Business Collaborative. And if you don't think you have time to join a women's organization, these women are the busiest women I've ever met in my life. Even trying to get them on a phone call was crazy. And yet every woman here is donating their time to the Women Business Collaborative. I would invite any of you to get involved with WBC or any women's group. We have yes, we're going to build pipelines, but we also have a responsibility to be those women that go out there and make change. I would strongly suggest that you connect with these women on LinkedIn. What makes me sad is we've only scratched the surface of building the C-suite pipeline. There's so much more information that we could share, and hopefully we get that chance in the future. But what I want to really challenge all of you to do is please take something that you heard today and implement it. You've got a ton of ideas from these women. Please implement something as a result of our panel. Take one idea. What did somebody say? Was it a crisis journal? What was the idea that someone said that just resonated with you? Ladies, we've got 3 minutes left. I'm going to give each of you 1 minute to give your last advice to anybody on the call. I'm going to start with you, Kimber. Last piece of advice.
As you had said, Barb, get involved in a women's leadership group. That community will support you and help you grow. And there's so many out there, and find your local one and a national one and a global one.
Perfect. Suba. You're muted, Suba. Okay.
Sorry, I would say be yourself because everyone else is taken. Be authentic, be your true self, because this moment in time is more open to that authenticity than ever before. And remember, empathy and vulnerability are leadership competencies. Empathy and vulnerability. Do not forget that. They do not make you weak, they make you strong. They can be your superpower.
Absolutely. And Rosina.
So I would say know your core self. Know what you bring to the table. Don't strive for perfection. It is a career distraction. Strive for excellence. Be the best you can be in the situations you're in, but know yourself and put that forward.
Ladies, it has been such an honor for me to moderate this panel of the talent that I see before me. And I hope all of you listening take action, because these ladies have given you some phenomenal advice. And thank you for inviting us to do this panel. And I wish you all continued success. Thanks so much, ladies.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, we're all here.
Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Welcome everyone to the Future of Work for the Future of Women. Elizabeth, all yours.
All right. Hello, everybody. I am extremely honored to be able to moderate this panel of incredible experts and thought leaders around a subject that is playing out real time in all of our work lives. We have just experienced probably the most profound global disruption of the workplace ever, because we've all experienced it real time through technology across every country in the world. It's affected the supply chain. It has affected every aspect of how we think about work and the future of work. So this panel is focused on what will happen to women post this disruption and how can we take advantage of it for good. Whenever I am on a panel or host a panel, I love to hear from each speaker in their own voice right at the top, so we're all grounded in their background and expertise. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves. And Jane, why don't we start with you? Jane Oates of Working Nation.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth, and great to be here. As Elizabeth said, I'm Jane Oates. I'm the president of Working Nation, which is a nonprofit media entity telling the stories about all people's transition from education to work, back to education, and hopefully back to a better position in the workforce. Most of my time in my career, I've been in government and delighted to have served in the Obama administration, most recently as the Assistant Secretary of Labor.
Perfect. Thanks, Jane. And Melissa?
Hi, good afternoon. So Melissa Peak, so pleased to be with such an incredible panel of leaders. I lead workforce strategy for a division of Amazon Web Services that is consulting companies all over the world, public sector companies. And I came to that role after over 2 decades of working with hundreds of companies to help them solve talent strategy issues, and really excited actually about this topic. So thank you, Elizabeth, for having me.
Yes, thank you, Melissa. And Kip.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elizabeth. And in addition to my co-panelists, Jane and Melissa, really excited to be here today. I am president and CEO of a mid-sized IT staffing and recruitment company called Genuint. I have been in the staffing / services / workforce management space for nearly all of my career, 30 some odd years, and have a lot of thoughts and insights on the topics we're going to share today. So I'm excited to be part of it.
Great. Thanks, Kip. So just to reiterate, this panel will focus on this huge disruption that has taken place, is still playing out, and how workplace leaders, corporate leaders, policymakers, and women themselves can manage and leverage this upheaval for good instead of being set back. On the last panel, I was very surprised to learn from Barbara Bruno that 5 times the number of women have left the workforce during COVID. And there was 1 month, January 2020, when for the first time women were the majority of the workforce, and it happened for 1 month, and then it ended. So it's all about restoration of women in the workforce, but also how do we leverage for real advancement? So my first question is to Jane Oates. What has this disruption done to working women, and what needs to happen from a policy perspective to leverage progress? Specifically, are there silver linings when looking at job creation? And I want you to really articulate, because you're such a guru of DC and policy, around the new infrastructure bill and tech, green, and infrastructure. And how will women participate in that? Biden administration should be doing to really change the game for women in the workforce?
So, Elizabeth, I think the last panel did a great job, as you said, really setting the stage for this. I mean, right now we are dealing with the lowest labor market participation rate by women since 1988. That's a disgrace. And we can shake our heads and say, oh, it's retail and hospitality. But the reality is women have stepped out for all the reasons the last panel articulated, for family care, for child care, also for the, obviously many of them lost their employer, not only their job. So I want to focus a second on what the silver linings could be. First, I have to put the bad news out there. I mean, literally, only 25% of the jobs in tech are held by women. And that is when you define tech really broadly to include things like billing and coding in healthcare. So women are really underrepresented. And they're underrepresented right now. Today, only 35% of the jobs, when you talk infrastructure, that are entry-level jobs in construction, in the energy sector, in all the things that we put, when we're talking about utility companies, only 35% of those entry-level jobs are held by women. And finally, I mentioned construction as a passing. 9% of all construction jobs are held by women. 9. So if we're going to put big money, and I hope we do, into things like infrastructure, we need to make sure that there are targeted efforts to get women in at all levels. Yes, those entry-level jobs that I talked about, and get them the training they need, but also put them in management jobs there. Women know how to manage. They might not know how to be a carpenter, but they know how to manage a project. And then make sure you're using women-owned businesses in the supply chain. I think that's incredibly important as we move forward. And look, I think the Biden administration, everybody thinks, you hear people take shots at trying to do too much in one bill, trying to do too many different things, a progressive agenda. Including childcare is an equity issue. An unpartnered woman cannot go to work if she does not have childcare. So I think going after all of these things and improving education, which will include after-school programs and universal preschool programs, all of those things will make it more possible for women to take salary jobs and get back into the economy on a career path.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Jane. I wanted to shift to Melissa for a moment and then come back to some of Jane's points with Kip. Melissa, you're an executive, but you are also a mother of 5 children. And that is profound. I grew up in a family of 5 children, and I have no idea how on earth you are juggling all this. This time has been absolutely crushing for so many parents who literally do operate as teachers during the day and then try to attend to the rest of their family pressures and their jobs at night. How did you do it? And how should women build that infrastructure of emotional support to manage through the rest of COVID and the pandemic, but frankly, beyond, as we've seen, the very nature of the workplace change, where there'll be more flexibility and more hybrid working, that will put many women at home more than they have been in the past.
Mm-hmm. So first of all, I think I'm not unique in the fact that everyone has done unprecedented things in this last year. So everyone has had to assess, what are the resources available to me? What are my priorities? What am I going to prioritize? And not everybody has had as much choice. I do think choice is the ultimate luxury. So to answer the first question that you asked, how did I manage it? I have a fantastic husband who's a great partner. And so we sat down and we really looked at who was going to do what. For a period of time, all of our children are still doing school from home. They've been virtual the whole time, and they still are. They won't go back to school till August. And so for a period of time, and my company was very supportive of this, I flexed my schedule. So I would work I have a global job, so I worked from 5 a.m. until 11, and then took a break and came back later on in the evening and caught up on things. So for a period of time that worked. Over time, we've tried different things. I don't think there's one size fits all, but we've had to adapt as a family, as many have. So my older children have had to step up and take some responsibility to help out with younger kids. And so we've worked through it as a family. But in terms of how do women, for the broader question, how do women come out of this? A couple of things I'm observing. Everyone has been running on adrenaline. There's been a lot of adrenaline for the last year plus just to get through. We were just surviving. And now we're in this moment where the adrenaline's fading and there's honest assessment of what's next? What's important to me next? And so first, I think it's really, we have to take a moment and just give ourselves permission and space to release the pent-up energy from the past year. It's been intense, and everybody has experienced that intensity in different ways. But just plowing ahead without pausing and working through that, making sure that we capture lessons learned. It would be a miss if we didn't do that. Many lessons learned for a lot of people. I know several on the panels today will probably talk about that. But for women, as we look at the future of the workplace and how this everybody's shifting to work from home so quickly has changed work. For me, it's given women more options. The priority is going to be to have the skills. You want to put yourself in the best position to be in demand so that you're in the driver's seat. You have the ability to say where you want to work, how you want to work. And so that's the message that I've been sharing with people lately, is where possible to arm themselves with the highest level of skill that employers need if they're going to be in the work, if they're going to be working for a company, or if they're going to be an entrepreneur. It's really about supply and demand. And so putting ourselves in a position where we have the skills that employers are most looking for, or the product that customers need, that's going to give women the best choices. And a lot of that is not, you don't even have to pay for that. So certifications, certainly in the technology industry, certifications have become a really important currency for validation of skill. That, not to say degrees are going away. Degrees are important. Certainly that continues to be an important piece, but you don't have to go back to get a degree in a technology field in order to be relevant. And so there are micro learning opportunities. AWS certifications, for instance, there's free training through AWS training and certification that really do open new doors for women so that they can decide where they want to play and how they want to play. And those skills range from very technical to the ability to coordinate big infrastructure projects. They don't have to be the hands-on keyboard person. They can be the person really understanding how to get groups working together to meet a common objective. So there's opportunity for those who do have that hard coding expertise, but there's also a lot of opportunity for people who don't. I do not come from a technical background. My undergraduate was English literature. I got an MBA, but I'm not a technical person, and I sit at AWS, and that's been my message for women as we come out of this, to really think about how they can position themselves for the best opportunity in alignment with what they're deeming most important to them as they come out of this phase. Oh, and Elizabeth, I think you are on mute.
Sorry about that. Kip, Jane just commented that if you do a really broad definition of tech, women make up 25%. But in terms of the hardcore tech and IT, you really cite it at about 10%. And your firm specializes in recruiting and placing IT talent. We've seen this huge disruption in the very manner in which goods and services are being delivered during COVID, and much of that will survive. What do women need to do to not be left behind?
Yeah, so first and foremost, a couple of comments on some of the other speakers' comments as well. I think it's really profound as you look at what Jane spoke about in terms of job creation and where some of these jobs are going to be driven. She talked about green energy. She talked about infrastructure, but she also mentioned tech. And tech is a field where I think you're going to see significant growth in the next several years as more and more companies, as you mentioned, really start to look at how they reposition themselves. How are their customers buying? How do they deliver the services or products to their customers in a new and potentially even more remote or less location or geo-specific manner? And the only way you're going to be able to do that is to leverage technology to really get to some of those answers. And so we are absolutely seeing within our industry a profound growth. In fact, our order activity for technologists is literally 54% higher than the same quarter last year, Q1, prior to the pandemic. It's as high as I've ever seen. Companies are desperately looking to try to find ways to reposition themselves, to take advantage of a remote workforce, in and of itself, by the way, which is a tremendous silver lining. So I think that that's something that as any individual, but in particular as women in the workforce and looking for the types of opportunities out there that they can take advantage of, I think technology is an area that's underappreciated and that is going to see a lot of the growth. So the question is, how can you position yourself to participate in that? If you're at a stage in your career where you can actually go out and take some of the training, even some of the training that Melissa mentioned in terms of AWS and other development platforms or coding platforms or even data visualization platforms, and we're seeing a huge growth in data visualization, do it. I think those are going to be invaluable. It's pretty clear from our perspective as we look at graduates who are coming out of college. They're trained, especially those that come out with technical degrees, they're trained in a very general perspective, a very generic perspective around technologies. They don't have specific skills and acumen within a certain technology stack. And so I think that's where, micro-learning can be an important element of that. But, make no mistake, technology is growing to a point where it's the ability to understand what the technology does and how it solves business problems, which is very different than it was 10 years ago when it was all about coding and integrating and really understanding the guts, so to speak, of the technology. Now it's configuration, it's how do you leverage the functionality that's in there. So I think it's a lot easier path to learn technology now than what it was in the past. And then if you think about that, and Melissa made a comment, not necessarily coming from a technical background herself, it's about leadership. It's about understanding business challenges and organizational challenges and how you can solve those. And it's going to take leaders, it's going to take management. And so I do think there are opportunities in technology, even if you don't come from a technology background.
Thanks, Kip. So we'll come back to this about what role will technology play in real recruiting and training and onboarding and advancement in a real way that is measurable. But I wanted to turn back to Jane because we're also living in an era of one of the largest wealth gaps in history in the United States, and that expanse is only getting wider. How can we restore the middle class in a way that'll benefit women? And do you believe we're entering an era where leaders really mean it when they talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion? Or are we simply entering an era where it's way more sophisticated in terms of a form of window dressing?
So I have to be optimistic, but I think, especially for this audience, we have to hold the employers who have made verbal promises. We have to hold their feet to the fire. I mean, I'm encouraged because I don't know whether anyone's following California, but Governor Newsom and his wife really took on women on boards. And today, there are only 22 companies in the state of California who haven't added a woman to their board in the last calendar year. That's pretty amazing. That's direct, targeted leadership saying we're going to have a measurable goal of having women added to every board, and they're doing it. They're having real success. I look again at 90 to 0. The fact that we have nonprofits and corporations coming together with higher education institutes to really look at that wage gap. What's it about? And I think in our recovery, what we need to do, both within our own networks and to those people that are on the fringes of our network that don't have the benefit of a professional network, we need to give them good advice. They need to get on a career pathway and not just take a job, because a job gives you money in the short term. A career pathway gives you more money as you learn more skills and really express your ability, whether it's in leadership or tech or anything else, to take on more responsibility. And I think the wealth gap, the reason that the wealth gap is so high between men and women, and certainly between people of color and whites, is because while people have gotten a job, they haven't been mentored. They haven't been sponsored to move up in that job when when opportunities arise and their skills are a match. And I really point, I am not anti-male. I married one and I gave birth to another. So it's not that I'm against men at all, but men have never apologized for promoting within their own companies their male colleagues. Women have to take a page from that book. It's not like you're going to promote a woman or a person of color or a person that may have a different sexual orientation. It's not that you're promoting them because of who they love or what they look like. You're promoting them because they're the most talented person. So let's, as women, take a vow today that we're not going to be ashamed to do that. We're not going to be ashamed to bring another woman into a meeting and say, I'm bringing Melissa in with me because she did all the work. Yes, I'm her supervisor and I'm getting the credit, but she needs to be here at the table, demonstrating upfront to you how skilled she is.
Okay, thank you, Jane. Melissa, I'm going to change gears a little bit. Here's my experience. I was an executive at Apple, and for me, what I observed, I came to Washington and then headed the rights campaign. So most of my work has been in helping to lead the LGBT movement, and we've made tremendous progress around marriage equality and other key issues. But what I observed when I was a young executive at Apple is that FaceTime was essential. Exposure to the C-suite, being seen, presenting. I was general counsel of Claris Corporation, which was the wholly owned subsidiary, the software subsidiary. So that gave me tremendous exposure to everybody, the CEO and all of the C-suite. And that frankly propelled my advancement. What happens in this new world of how do people get that FaceTime and exposure and to be able to sort of demonstrate their talent in a world that is now driven so profoundly by technology and by remote Zoom calls and sessions like this?
I think it's such a good conversation. I was actually just having a discussion this morning with a leader on my team who's running an early career, because I think the answer to that question is a little bit different based on your career phase. So for people who have some experience, and for those who are becoming executives, it's about being proactive to not put yourself in the room. And that means leveraging allies. That means leveraging sponsors. That also just means asking for the work. If there's a project, if there's a problem that needs to be solved, stepping up to say, I want to be part of that team, or I want to lead that team. But that's nice to say. Once you have the experience, you've got a network that you can rely on. Certainly letting allies and sponsors know that it's a priority to be in the room, to have the visibility, and that there is, and to ask for their help, I think is a really wise step. For early career individuals, it's similar, but it's also about leveraging some different tactics. So it's being very proactive to reach out. One of the things I love about the Amazon culture is it's very open. You can reach out to just about anybody except for maybe Jeff Bezos, and ask for time and learn about their job and learn about what they're doing. And so I have found in my life that people are willing to have those conversations, but it does take courage and intentionality. What is it that you're trying to learn? Who is it what type of project are you trying to get exposure to? I also think for earlier career individuals, it is about finding a way, where can you lead? You might not be the leader of the project, but there is a leadership crisis. And there is so much opportunity for people who want to lead and want to step up and say, I'll be accountable for that. I will own that. I'm going to be the one. It's not laissez-faire. I'm not going to keep my head down so that nobody knows about me. I'm going to step up. I'm going to ask for the opportunity to lead this. And of course, then being wise to leverage the people in leadership to make sure that you're in a position to be wildly successful in that project. I do also think that there is I'm starting to hear rumbles of pushback, that everybody working from home is just as effective as being in person. I don't agree with that. I think there's other people who are realizing they don't agree with it either. So I don't think it's an either or. The pendulum has swung wildly over to working from home. I do think by the end of this year, it's going to come back to a midpoint where there's more working from home, but there is still strategic in-person sessions, especially for professionals. And so in those moments, it's all about how can you, in those few moments, make the greatest impact and build the most memorable brand with the people that you're trying to influence in those moments that you are face to face. But I don't think it's going to be, I do think we're going to go back to more working out of the office. It's never going to be the way it was 20 years ago. So learning how to leverage the technology so you're not fumbling with it probably is smart because you're going to have to use it at some point. So when you're using it, you want to definitely come across as competent and capable.
Thank you. With that, I unmuted on time. So here, I want to get a little more provocative here. We are told that we need to create a level playing field. And we're told we live in a meritocracy. And neither of those things is true. I mean, and I also completely like men. I did not marry one because I'm what's called a gold star gay person, always gay. But I do have a son, by the way. But, you know, here's my thought. The whole idea of women on board started in Norway, and they set a 40% marker. And it became a joke. For a couple of years, they said, oh, we'll go drag women off the street and shove them on boards. And, you know, but it happened. And you know what happened in Norway? The seasons kept coming. The companies kept operating. All those women on those boards only made it better, not worse. But here in the United States, we are taught that it's taboo to act like there's anything but a level playing field and a meritocracy. So my question is, given California and given California's move, and given the slow pace of progress that we're looking at hundreds of years to catch up, because honestly, to be a white heterosexual male is a little bit like compounding interest. The privilege just builds on itself over the decades and centuries as property is passed down. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that 80% of the executives in corporations are going to be white men. So what about quotas? Because in essence, that's precisely what California did. They created a quota. And again, this is the most taboo word in corporate America in terms of advancement. I'd love to hear all of you comment on that.
Well, I'll jump in first and foremost, and I'm quite sensitive to the fact that I am the white male heterosexual on this panel. Look, I can only offer this without having the true perspective that many of you do, but I know that change isn't going to happen unless there are many of us like myself that are willing to advocate for it, that are willing to push to change the composition of their own company. When I took over, this company had one executive female leader. Today, 50% of my direct reports are female, and that's an important and distinct badge that I wear that I think is a mark of progress and a mark of commitment. And I don't think we're anywhere where we need to be, because if I look at the layer below that, I don't have the mix of gender or even racial mix that I believe is going to be appropriate to move forward. So I would say it's an ongoing challenge. It's an ongoing effort. It may take certainly some commitments in terms of targeted numbers for us to make some of these movements. But it's also going to take many of us stepping forward and saying we're willing to take the risk and to make that change and to drive that change personally, regardless of what it means to us as individuals.
Yeah, and of course, I'm not opposed to quotas, but half of the states in this country have on their books a law saying you can't even donate money to a university saying I want this to fund a scholarship for a woman or a woman of color or a person of color, and not even a gender piece. So, I mean, I think we have to do more of some of the things we're doing. I think people should steal California's idea and make a mark, say this is what we're going to do, and then measure your progress. I think that we should take existing things that we have in companies like ERGs and really do more with them than just sing Kumbaya. Really do, how are we promoting using those ERGs? How are we recognizing leaders who have shown real leadership in ERGs? And I think we should do the same with corporate social responsibility. I mean, so many corporations have wonderful programs across the board, but I want to focus for a second on women. Really, they support Dress for Success. They do all kinds of women's leadership things. They help community-based organizations. Why not hire from that pool that you're supporting with your corporate social responsibility? Why not cross your HR function with your social responsibility function? And you would find a lot of tremendously qualified women to come in corporations. There are women making $50,000 a year running community-based organizations that are changing lives. Let's bring them into corporate America and let them make $500,000 a year doing the same thing for a different paycheck.
And I'll echo, I'm not against quotas. I think it is a moment in time where employers that really are leaders, who really have the culture that, so many employers aspire to culture, and culture is very complex, but teams and companies, this is a moment where they can instill their own targets that they're really serious about. Instead of waiting for a quota, I think a quota is fine. It's one tool for accelerating the pace of change. I don't know. My opinion is if you had to wait for an external indicator to tell you that having diverse leadership was a good idea, then I don't know if I want to invest in your company. if you had to wait for somebody else to tell you that, what is it that you're not realizing about the value of having diverse thought at the table and the impact? It's well documented. And so what's the gap? It's been proven. So if it's not happening, what's going on there? And of course, change takes time. So I think that what I see positive is teams, men and women together, getting really serious, men and women and other minority populations getting very serious about moving the needle and no longer allowing themselves the outs of it's hard. There's not a pipeline. That's not true. There absolutely is a pipeline. It's hard. That's okay. We are leaders. We do hard things. Yeah, it takes a lot of intentionality. It takes a lot of getting into the really minute details to figure out how to make it happen sometimes. And sometimes it's really not that hard. Sometimes we're just going to not do it the same way we've always done it. So instead of following the same procedure, let's look at what's an alternative method for accomplishing this goal. And a lot of that has to do with procurement and the way recruiters work. I mean, a lot of it's just very operational, and we have to get out of that inertia of just doing things the same way that we've always done them, because we're never going to move the needle if we do that. So I would encourage companies to not wait for somebody else to impose a goal on them, step up to the goals. For individuals, women are choosing the companies that they want to go to now. And so for individuals, if you're in that position where you have skills that are valuable and you can make decisions about where you want to be, which I know is a luxury, those companies who are not creating an environment where diverse populations can thrive will lose, because they're going to lose the best talent. They're going to lose diverse minds at the table. And so for companies who are seeing that happening, it's probably a good opportunity to pause and reevaluate what's actually happening, because that's an indicator that something's not right. And so women do have a lot of choice. There are a lot of options for us at this point, and the more options we give ourselves, the better we are. But I think that over the course of time, as companies who are going to put their money where their mouth is, so to speak, are intentional about driving change, great women are going to find great positions helping those companies be even more successful. And for me, that's if it ends up being accelerated by a quota, so be it. I'd love to see leaders lead and not require a quota to change, which I know may be a little idealistic, but I'll continue to champion it.
Thank you, Melissa. So my current career, after running a nonprofit for 10 years, is in commercial real estate. And commercial real estate is the last bastion of capitalism run amok. It is a sea, as I mentioned to some of you before, of young, no offense, Kip, we love you, but young white, really good looking males that are kind of GQ in their profile. And so I have returned to the world of Mad Men. And I am very proud of my particular company and sort of delighted about it. I had a lot of trepidation of entering into commercial real estate, but I'm passionate about organizations that can do it, owning their real estate and all the advantages of that. But in stepping back in, it really, CBRE happens to have half of our board are women and people of color, and many, many of our key C-suite roles are women and people of color. So our CEO, Bob Sulentic, has been ultra intentional, and I think that's what it takes. Another side note, when I was at the Human Rights Campaign, we created and launched the Corporate Equality Index, and that measured how corporations cross-industry, cross-geography were treating their LGBT employees. It had a profound effect. It was like a slow-moving grass fire, and it caused massive shift in corporate behavior without the imposition of rules from outside. So I want to get down to brass tacks because I'm tired of words. how do we operationalize? What are other ways to operationalize advancement within an entity, within an enterprise, any kind of corporation? How do you measure it? And what is the kind of, imagine reporting mechanisms to really show how a company moves from year to year in really reporting out the advancement of women and people of color. And please, anyone jump in.
I was letting the business people go first, but I think I'll start with a very simple thing. A company could start tomorrow saying, we're not going to make any promotion or any new hire unless we have a diverse pool from which to pick. So that means instead of saying automatically, you go from here to here to anybody in a position, man or woman, you have to make sure there's diversity represented in that talent pool. You are transparent about it, and you make the best business decision. And if that business decision is a white male, then that's fine. But there should be something that comes out and say, here are the things that made him a better candidate than the rest of you, so that I have a pathway for myself to better myself so that I can be more competitive the next time.
And Elizabeth, you mentioned intentionality. So a couple of best practices that I'll share. So I agree on the interviewing, diverse loops. I think also interviewers, making sure that you have diverse interviewers, because different interviewers are seeing different things and are going to pick up on different things. And that's a really important aspect of hiring differently. But hiring is just a piece of it, right? If we're hiring and the culture is not a culture where individuals are going to thrive, it's just a revolving door. So I would say from an advancement of women perspective, one, having honest conversations as a leader that this is a priority, and talking within the leadership team, is it a hiring strategy? Is it an upskilling of current talent strategy? And identifying what are the barriers today. And that's going to take a lot of honest discussion. What's the barriers today for minorities within this group to actually move forward? And then having the leadership team take ownership and accountability to sponsor some really specific change management pieces that are going to move the needle to reduce those barriers. I also, allyship is really, really important, and spending time as a leadership team, understanding what does it mean to be an ally? What's our agreed upon language? When we're seeing something that is not doesn't align with the values that we say to espouse and is not in alignment with the goals of getting to gender parity or creating the most diverse, inclusive, and equitable culture, how are we going to address it? Let's just talk about it right now, because it's going to happen. We're on this journey together. Some of the metrics are representation, percentage of minorities in leadership at all levels. I mean, these are things that a lot of organizations have been doing for a long time, but what a lot of organizations don't do, and I understand why, because it puts them out for people to criticize, is they don't publicly share that data. And so publicly sharing the data, what you measure what matters, right? So if you're publicly sharing that data, you're measuring it in an open way and having conversations, it puts you in a position where if it doesn't change over time, the employees in your organization are going to start calling you out on that. So those are best practices I've seen work well. And it's a practice, it's a journey. These things, the reason we need this level of intentionality is because it's not easy, but the key is to never take your foot off the gas and keep driving toward targeted, agreed upon targets together as a leadership team.
Well, thank you so much. The time flew by. I wanted to note that this is a whole other panel, but we're also living in a time, not just during a worldwide pandemic, but also an acute kind of global plate tectonics between racial justice and gender justice, Me Too, Black Lives Matter. And I'm seeing the emerging of a new consciousness among corporate leaders, particularly CEOs, like the Business Roundtable taking positions on things like voting and on social issues that 30 years ago they would not have touched. And Kip, as a CEO, I'm going to have you close us out. Is that what you're seeing as well, the sort of new brand of CEO, and then we have to call time?
Yeah, I mean, sure. Look, I'll try to be brief with this. There's no question that amongst my peers that are within my industry, there's an overwhelming awareness of the shift, the tectonic shift that's taking place, and that it's time for us as leaders to be intentional. I love the word intentionality. One of the things that when I was first asked to join WBC and be part of this effort, I remember Edie Frazier came to me and said, what would you like to do? And I said, well, I know my industry. I know we have a lot of progress we could make around gender equality. And if it's okay, I'd love to get a subcommittee together and shine the light on that. Sometimes simply creating the awareness and the education around that is enough to start the effort. I mean, many of the things that you, Jane and Melissa both talked about in terms of having the right slate of candidates, of looking at promotability, of having options. I mean, I think all that has to come with being very intentional about where you recruit and how you recruit too. You're going to have to cast your net to the right spot. Otherwise, you're going to catch the same fish, right?
Yeah.
And so I would say that, and I'll leave with one closing thought. We formed our own D&I committee last year, and I literally just gave them free rein and said, drive us where you think this needs to go. And the most profound quote that I heard come out of that, which has been kind of my driving principle since then, was one of the team members said, well, what we really want is not to be invited to the party, is to be invited to plan the party. And
I love that. Kip, we're going to have to leave it there, but that's a great quote to end on. Thank you for such a rich conversation. I appreciate all of you, and thank you for being on this panel.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Happy day, right?
Yes.
Day. Amazing. Hey, Delisa.
Hi, how are you? Hi, Delisa. Hi, Faye. Hello, hello.
Felicity, you look beautiful.
Thank you. I'm in my all my Eid glory today. Eid Mubarak.
Oh, amazing. Is it incredible, Gwen, the amount of substance? Oh, wow.
Such amazing speakers and insights.
Right?
So. Oh, what is that weird sound?
We've got some audio challenges. I think it's Gwen.
Oh, is it Gwen? It sounded like Minnie Mouse. Good to test.
Welcome everyone. It's good to have you. Gwen is going to be rejoining us here momentarily. This is definitely the closing keynote conversation around catalyzing the future. So as we're waiting for Gwen, if you'd like to get started, please don't hesitate.
That sounds fantastic. Well, Edie, I think you started us off really well by saying, you know, what phenomenal content we heard today.
Yes.
Gwen, how's your audio doing?
Hopefully better. Does that sound better, everybody? I was going to ask everybody else to just mute because here we are at the close of an amazing almost 4 hours of insight, information, connection, conversation, inspiration. And to sum it up and continue the engagement around these issues and to discuss our commitment to understand and change the face of business leadership to reflect the world that we live in, I am joined by Delisa Guerrier, who's the Managing Director of Guerrier Development and Real Estate Expert, based out of Nashville. Felicity Hassan, who is the Managing Director of Adelis and also directs Involve, a member and advisory firm that drives inclusion and belonging from New York City, and a WBC board member, co-chair of the Advisory Council. Faye Sahai, who is the Managing Director of Vinaj Ventures, investing in digital health startups, and also partner Mirai Global Advisory Corp on innovation, joining us from the Bay Area and one of our leaders. And of course, Edie Frazier, the CEO of the Women Business Collaborative. So let's start it off. Felicity, I want to start with you. What really grabbed your attention from the many panel conversations?
You know what? I think one of the things which really stood out for me, and it's a bit of a theme of what I've been thinking about recently, so perhaps it was just on my mind, was the importance of recognizing potential and showing willingness to take a chance on people. That was one of like the real aha moments for me. And I think it was Mia Menz who talked about it so eloquently. She kind of raised the point of, you know, if I have great credentials, I have Ivy League credentials, but if I didn't, would I have got as far as I did? Would people have taken me as seriously as they have? And I think we're at such an inflection point, and I think that COVID has been great in that as well, in making us really kind of think, you know, question all of like the traditional things that we thought about around like FaceTime and the workplace and how things have always been done. And I would love to see a future where we aren't quite so tied to academics and traditional credentials, because I think it's going to open up the talent field and give such a huge opportunity to a vast number of women who, for whatever reason, challenges of balancing careers and families and things like that, who may just not have taken a more conventional path. Mm-hmm. And so just a great opportunity to, you know, Jamie really kind of then highlighted it, pay it forward. Really, like, don't hold people to those credentials. Think open, be open-minded about what you're doing, show willingness to take a chance and pay it forward.
Hey, I see you nodding. I'd love to bring you in on what really captured you.
Oh, it was just amazing. There were so many, just two to highlight is that we really need more women and diversity in sciences, technology, engineering, and math. As we know, technology is in all of our lives and it's going to transform and change. But if we don't have that diversity, we already see what's happened. Computer vision that doesn't recognize darker skin, Siri that didn't recognize my mother's Asian accent, right? We really need that. And as we catalyze into the future and as we look at how all these fields are going to impact it, we really need that inclusion in those areas. So I was so excited about that. I was really surprised that by 2030, women are going to control the majority of the money in this country. And we have a real opportunity to really change the way we invest and to make a positive impact. And right now, 70% of women hold their money in cash. So they're really not putting their money to work. So that was amazing to learn from the ET women investing in the future. So,
So here you go. Yeah, well, I sat in on quite a few, and like you guys said, they were amazing. Particularly making diversity and inclusion and equity happen spoke to me on a lot of levels. One thing that Roldy said was particularly focused on inclusion and how that has, if we look at the foundation of it, it's really a matter of perspective. And so at the top levels of these organizations, they can think that they're being inclusive by checking a box and inviting people to meetings or things like that. But if it doesn't create that sense of belonging, then it's not doing its job. And I'm paraphrasing, but also Rohini said that the rules need to be changed, that there's been a lot of funds given towards diversity, inclusion, and equity, around 66 billion from what they could quantify. And that's a start, but there's more that needs to be done. And Jerry Mason Hall really, she quoted, "The rising tide lifts all boats." Such an inspiring just quote, because it really does speak to that there's organizations and there are conversations like this happening that is really spearheading the change that we need to see with diversity, inclusion, and equity. So very powerful.
Delisa, I think we all see Dee and I was everywhere in every panel, right?
Yes.
To appreciate the stories and the journeys and the change that we talked about, and our actions are so different.
Yes.
And clearly, whether it's STEM or entrepreneurship and capital, we heard it everywhere. I think we also heard the whole focus on changing talent. As Suba said, what do you really want to do? Even in early roles, if you could set off whether you are in sales or business development and how you're encouraged to do different kinds of things. And I think it was so clear on the panel that really talked about the future with Lorraine and Woodland Bourne and others to talk about it is a new day. It is a new day where we don't have to go back to our old days, and we have to be really receptive to this kind of change and its new rules. And as we really see everybody advance, the healthcare really talked about the same kind of inequities, and our sensitivity of really getting healthy women will make the healthy economy. So it's just, as we look across the board, we can't cite every speaker. I know we've all been so touched, but we've been touched in terms of this collaboration for action to drive a new day. And clearly, we're catalyzing the future today with what we've heard from 9 amazing panels.
So how do we, picking up on the rising tide, the collaboration, all of us here, what actions can we take to continue to build this movement and continue to keep working today, tomorrow, in the future? But the tide continues to rise, as Edie would say, all boats, but all boats connected. We're all going the same place together. How do we continue this? How do we continue the movement? Felicity, you're a movement person. Tell me more.
I honestly think, I think, the point that Faye made about STEM and the DEI role that Delisa was talking about, all of it, I think, speaks to innovation. right? And I think Edie kind of brought up this as well. Like, in order to kind of like keep momentum and keep moving forward, we have to be constantly changing, constantly innovating, constantly thinking about like what the new opportunities are. And that kind of speaks to like some of that stuff that was inspiring me earlier around like, you know, taking a chance on people, like really trying to bring in difference, really kind of thinking more laterally about like how we're kind of, you know, building out the talent in our workforce. You know, how are we mentoring people? How are we sponsoring people? How are we giving people the opportunity to really kind of harness that power that people don't necessarily organically have? If you had a privileged background, or if you were just naturally gifted in a STEM capacity, you know, perhaps you kind of ordinarily kind of gravitated towards that. But how are we helping those who perhaps might have that talent, but just don't know about it? Yeah. How do we help? How do we continue to drive? You know, Becky talked about this as well. How do we keep driving diversity? Because that is what kind of maintains the innovation. Mm-hmm. If we bring the same people into the room every single time, we will never change and you will become irrelevant real quick. So in order to kind of like keep the energy, keep the passion, keep the movement, it's all about bringing difference from all different walks of life, from all different perspectives. And that will just keep people thinking and keep people passionate and then keep the ball rolling. And I think that's the action we can take. Mentor people, not just mentoring, because we know that women are over-mentored, under-sponsored, but mentor definitely, and sponsor. Find opportunities, take chances on other women. Men do it all the time. We don't do it enough. Take some risks, bring some women to the table. Like there's so much potential out there.
The Challenge Network. Delisa Faye's nodding. She's like, tell me more.
I totally wholeheartedly agree with Felicity. You know, they basically predict that, you know, this kind of generation will live to 120 years old. So now we just have to imagine, what are we doing with those years in our life? And we have so much life to give, you know. So I just think from that, you know, I think as us as individuals to keep that open and learning, but then also us together. What can we do to power us together? You know, even asking in our companies, what are your diversity numbers? What are your plans? Where are you investing in your money? And how can we make that difference to have it go to the community, to the values that we all profess in, to this movement? I think it's a wonderful thing that we really have the opportunity to power. I mean, if you look at it, right, women control 70 to 80% of the consumer spend. That in itself is power. So, and I think it's just realizing our power.
Yeah. I think that accountability thing, that's huge. Yeah.
I think to really look at the foundation of what Felicity and Faye are both talking about is communication. You know, and there needs to just be a continuous conversation, and that conversation will stem to connections all across the world, just like we're doing here. That will really fuel us to be able to make that difference and see that change.
And I would just add to amplify what you're saying, because we are the movement. Yeah. But I think we did hear that word accountability. Yeah. And when we talked at the end about who is sharing the real data on their talent and their pay parity, and how we shine a light on those, as we talked about Walmart and IBM and the companies that are willing to stand up and disclose. So it is so important that we encourage them to enclose, because young people are going to want to work to the responsible, and those that absolutely demand. So as every company is thinking about, can you sponsor at least 2 women up the system instead of just mentoring, and hold everybody accountable in the movement? And we do the same thing for entrepreneurs, for capital firms, and all of our constituency to really see the drive for change.
Yeah. I want to tie to that continuous conversation to one of Joey Ryman's point about participation is the new purpose. You know, talking about that as a company, but talking about that as women, as the movement, as diverse women, as as you said, Delisa, this continuous conversation. I want to pick up, how do we keep talking, but how do we keep participating? How do we keep driving the change, not just today in these 4 or 5 hours, but you know, at 3:30 today, East Coast time, at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning? How are we continuously participating as individuals and as business owners or women in business? How do we keep doing that?
I think we have to normalize the conversation, and we have to bring men to the table. You know, we have to get everyone comfortable about talking about progress and talking about women, and dispel this myth that only women can be engaged in like women's advancement. That's just not the case. We want to make sure that we have male mentors and male sponsors and male allies of every movement. And you know what we talk about a lot at Audelis is like, you know, how many straight people do we have sponsoring the LGBT community? How many you know people like white executives do we have sponsoring communities of color? Like let's really think about like how we can all come together and like get rid of that, you know, shake off the comfort blanket and like really sort of get ourselves educated and up to speed with some of the challenges that perhaps we feel uncomfortable about. But the way that we can make change is by continuing the conversation, not just ourselves, but pulling everybody into that conversation. So it's not just women driving this change, it's men driving the change too. And that's where I think, you know, we've got so many men still in power, and that's not a bad thing. They've also done a great job as well. But, you know, how can they see the benefits and the strategic imperative for bringing more women to the table as well? Because to Faye's point, we've got a lot of money to spend.
Yeah.
So, you know, we could be a real valuable asset.
That's right. I love Felicity's point, and I was going to say the same thing. It's about stepping outside of our comfort zone. It's about showing up to situations where we normally wouldn't, and creating a safe space to where everyone can have a conversation that fuels the difference and the change that we need to see. So,
and don't we think we've all got to be bold to action together?
Yes.
Every day, if we could all think about every one of us, if we can get 1 million of us, men and women, to think about 5 actions a day and to tell the stories of the actions that we're taking is so important. And I think, as we heard from every panel, they're thinking local community, they're thinking the US, and often global, because our impact is intentional across that change, right? And clearly, as we're sponsoring and supporting and elevating one another, you know, tell the other person's story of that elevation. And if we did that every day with 1 million people, look at where we're going.
That's right.
And for anyone who's had the pleasure of working alongside Edie, we all know that she is the best at pumping up and empowering. One conversation with Edie on a bad day, and you will immediately feel empowered. And that's all of our responsibility. That's not just up to Edie to kind of bring that energy into the room. It's about all of us giving other women the tools and the power to be able to advocate for themselves and for their careers, because we've got so much to say, but for a long time, you know, I feel like we've been too humble about our achievements. And if we can just think about like, what have I achieved and what have I got to give back? I think you make a great point, Edie. Like sometimes, like, you know, thinking about 5 things that we can share in a day feels like an onerous task, but it's not that. It's not that onerous. Like we've just got to think about like, how can we keep promoting? How can we keep pumping up everyone around? How can we sort of share out that praise and that recognition?
So that's perfect, because what I want to do is I want to pull in Andy Simon, who started out with us and finished, kind of for that last question today. It's a couple ways I want to ask it so that you guys can sort of take it where you will. You know, what are you taking away from today? But I want to tie that to that passion and purpose discussion, right? What are we taking away? What's the one thing you're going to do or we can do together after today to be a part of that rising tide, building that network, continuous conversation, supporting one another? Joey said it is, you know, what's your Ella? But I want to, you know, to tie it to sort of, what are you walking away with today? What's your passion and purpose after today? And it could have been before, but how are we walking out? And I want to kind of bring in Faye. I'm going to start with you and let you guys go from there.
No, this has been an amazing day. Just the amazing amount of speakers, sessions, and talks. And my passion and purpose going out from today is just to invest even in more women more people of color. And it's really towards really helping our future generation with their kind of digital wellness and mental health. And from that standpoint with Vanage Ventures. But right now we're 71% women founders. We can do more, 50% people of color, but we would want to do more. So I think this is a real opportunity I'm so inspired by today. I'll hand it back to you, Gwen.
Andy, why don't you let us know? What's your passion? What's your purpose? What are you taking away from today?
You know, we started off by talking about smashing the myths and how we have spent the day smashing them. And so as I listened and jumped around, it was amazing, the conversations. So I just want to share some of the things that I believe. Felicity, you said it so well. Edie always gives you 4 or 5 things to focus on. And from the very beginning of my relationship with Women's Business Collaborative, I've been thinking about, I'll call it my oath. And I share it, I preach it, because it gives us stuff that's doable. It's that boat that's going to rise if we do it. So my first one is, if you see something, change it. I heard that all day today. Don't wait. Sam Radocchio said, change the system. I mean, you're going to fix it? Create a new one. And I heard that in the diversity. Everything is about, if you see it, change it. Don't wait. Don't let the rules create new rules. I love, the collaboration that Joey Raymond said. It's not about cooperation. It's not about competition. It's about together. And I do think that's powerful because it helps us all really do better. If you have the power, use it. This business of what the guys do and the gals do, it's for each other. I can't tell you, every woman in my book had a mentor, and he was a guy. We can help each other in very innovative ways. Don't watch others struggle. You see it. It becomes a great time to lend a hand, and it'll help your own sense of well-being. And it's a time for us to create new myths. And I really do believe it's a time for us to create a new reality, and not simply hope. It's not a good strategy, is to really act. So Gwen, as I watched this discussion, this was a brilliant ending to a brilliant day. How exciting it is for a moment to become a movement. And to your point, it really is time for us to keep the energy going. And if you watched the way in which it made the Women's Business Collaborative come alive, you don't know what it is until you see it, you feel it, and you then think about it. And today was really a visualization of what WBC is all about. So my sort of ending thoughts to your whole discussion is, wow, don't stop the energy. You're all smiling. A smile can take us everywhere. Gwen, back to you, Meg.
Well, I'm going to turn it over. When you said sort of rule breaker and changing the system, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa, because I know that's what you're doing over there. I want to hear from you.
Oh, thank you. Well, no, I think that just getting involved. Sometimes we get so into our day-to-day and the work just of what we're doing that we forget to get involved, and to be able to have conversations like this and to be able to participate. I think it's fundamental in really, seeing the shift. And so that's what I feel like is the most important part. That's where it starts.
Edie, come on in. I saw the get involved. Her eyes lit up.
Well, let's just say we're all going to be intentional. We've heard intentionality all day about what we do, and the word intersectional, because whether it's diversity or whether it is getting more women on boards or more women entrepreneurs or capital, we're going to be intersectional of everything we're thinking about. Commitment. When we started WBC, we made every women's business organization sign a commitment to collaborate and a commitment to drive change. And they did it as organization CEOs and as individuals. So today, what is our individual commitments to go get 1 million women and men to drive this movement? And do we share, as we ask for open data that is absolutely shareable, and share our stories with this massive communications? So it's just, and with a sense of fun and happiness and health for each as we really lift each other up.
Felicity.
Oh my goodness, it's so much. So first of all, I was just about to be joined by 2 children, which is
I
why
saw that. This is engagement, commitment, bringing the next generation, right?
I think I would play off, everything that has been said, from Andy's changing it to Delisa's forming a new path to Edie's challenges. Like, I think this is really all about accountability. It is not somebody else's responsibility. It is your responsibility. And everyone who's spoken on this panel today has the power and influence to be able to make change happen. So we all need to be sponsoring, we all need to be mentoring, and we all need to be driving the progress of the women around us. We all need to be paying it forward. And I think that's kind of like my biggest takeaway. What I take from here, what I'm so inspired about, is just build future leaders. If you just bring one person up the curve, I'm super engaged with the concept of apprenticeships right now. So that's probably just something which is kind of completely clouding everything. But I really think this concept of pulling people up through and giving people the power to really achieve is just the greatest gift that we can give back. And to Edie's point, do it with a smile, do it with humility, have some fun with it. We spend so much time working. Let's integrate it. Let's make it fun. Let's make it part of our life. Let's make it part of our families' lives. Let's get people engaged and really kind of bring the joy and the energy to what we're doing.
I love that. That is fantastic. I think that sort of bring the joy and bring the energy. And the change piece, I'm going to pull you in a little bit on the innovation, because I know you spoke a little bit earlier today about that in a particular field, but how does this sort of bring the movement, bring the innovation, make the change? A couple last thoughts from you.
No, I think we have a real opportunity to kind of bring this movement. And I kind of focus a lot on the technology. And now technology allows us, right, whether it's virtually now, to stream to thousands, millions, and have it keep going, but also for ways to us to engage, whether it's crowdfunding, engagement platforms, Slack, virtually, but also to be more inclusive. And it also allows us to be more transparent as we kind of publish, our data. I was so surprised to hear that only 11% of companies actually publish their data. 86 disclose their policies of diversity, but only 11%, so it was great to hear Donald and kind of the Walmart store and what they're really doing to change, and the millions of people they're impacting on their employees and the thousands of management. So I just think we all are kind of empowered to make a difference. So I'm so excited about what we can do.
Andy, I want you to come in, rethink women's leadership in business.
I have a quote for us to think about. It's William Gibson, the man who saw tomorrow, said, "The future is here. It's just not widely distributed yet." And I really felt today that our way forward is all around us if only we can see it. And I'm watching all the smiles on everyone's faces here because I really do think we should wait. And the time is now, not 20, 30 or 50 or 60 now. And why not? I'm thinking, as Felicity was pushing away her children, I'm thinking my granddaughters and giving them an opportunity to see what they can be. And it isn't limited by women don't do that or women can't do that or no, you can't. It's why not and how fast can you, and go for it. And so it's a whole new world that's right now, and let's make it happen. My last thoughts.
I want to bring in and think, Edie, I want to turn it to you, but I think Faye's point, and it shouldn't be lost, we're here from the Bay Area, from Nashville, from New York, from DC. Technology allows us to do this. It also allows us to bring in those diverse perspectives in a way that may have been impossible before, from not having to get on an airplane to actually hearing from somebody in a different city, talk about how they talk about it. I want to hear a little bit that from you in the Women Business Collaborative, spread across the United States and even global, how powerful is bringing all these different women, different types of businesses, different sectors together, and what does that mean for the change, the movement, and the collaboration?
Does everybody agree we are we, right? There is no I in we. And as clearly we just said, how can we really think we can impact 1 million? But think about what we just said about our communities, because it's local communities, it's our diverse communities, it's, as Gwen said, even some of our global. But the words that you all said that we just talked about, one is what is our action, the other is our engagement, and we just all talked about it. Inclusion and diversity are just at our forefront, because if we don't change the data of women of color and LGBTQ and all of that, is we are not reflecting the data of our communities, our customers, etc. And we just know. And then how are the word transparencies? Do we really push more than 11% of the companies? And we then end up, how do we celebrate? Because we keep saying, celebrate the number of women that are named CEOs, celebrate the women on boards, celebrate the companies that disclose data, celebrate the amount of capital that's going to women entrepreneurs, those that are leading. So much of that is communications, and is none of us can do it alone, because everybody that's been on today, which is hundreds and hundreds of people, have to now say what they can do. And as Gwen, you and all of us think through, how do we collect all these actions that are being taken, is then we're going to not only advance the movement, but really equate the rethinking, Andy, that you told us to do towards action. And we've all said is the changes now, it's really being bold and brave. And Delisa, when we first met you and you said you went after 330 million of venture capital against your purpose of wanting to do something to have kids read, and you develop these, or you're developing these parts. How do we encourage everybody we listen to, and how do we connect others? Because it is the connectors that we all are with the collaboration, Gwen, right? So how exciting that we feel more and more committed to really drive for each other.
That is the perfect way. And we're going to start off with you, Felicity, to get, what is the one word? If I'm walking away after these 4 hours, whether I'm on the stage or I'm in the audience, or I've been on the stage and I'm in the audience, or I'm on my tweets and Twitters. Oh my gosh, I'm old. What is the one word? What's the one word you want people to take away or to hear? What's the one word you can think of for today?
Grateful.
Grateful.
Grateful. Grateful to be surrounded by such incredible, empowering, inspirational, accomplished women. Just incredibly grateful.
Faye.
My word is change. We can make the change. Change is going to be constantly happening, and we can be that powerful change.
Delisa. Is she on mute or frozen for a second? Let's keep moving. Andy Simon.
I think the word is rethink.
I was going to say.
Stuck on rethinking. I really do like rethink, and it's time to rethink women, because let's smash those myths and become the best that we can be. And that's what our purpose is, and our passion. And that's what we
Love
want.
that. Perfect. Delisa, are you back with us? There we are.
My technical difficulties.
We can hear you now.
Great. Well, my word is actually one that you guys put in the heading of this, and it's catalyze. We all have the ability, like Felicity said, to take accountability, and through that we can catalyze this change.
And Gwen, my word is commitment, but I want to ask what your word is.
My word is collaborate. We are all here together. To me, that means communication. Let's do it, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody, for an amazing day, for an amazing closing panel. Sai.
Thank
you, Sai.
Thank you,
Sai. And your team.
Yes.
You're muted, Sai. You're muted, Sai. You of all people are muted, Si.
Thank you all so much. How do we express the gratitude and the wisdom and the energy and the passion? What do we say?
Yeah, it's been a great day.
So
Truly
this
tremendous.
is a challenge towards our summit in September, right, everybody?
Yes,
The bar
indeed.
surpassed today and is clearly brings so many others with us. So all of you help us think, give us what you're believing, what you want to do. We're here to really activate together. And Si, thank you. And to Andy and to every one of you, as we are, as one of you just said, so grateful.
Yeah.
I want to thank everybody who's come and is now texting all kinds of things. The impact is terrific. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Spread the word. Bye-bye.
Truly.
Bye.
And likewise, thank you all.
Thank you, Si. Thank you,
Take good
Andy.
care. Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Edie.
See you all in September.